Kia ora, good morning. Welcome to our Strategy and Finance Committee meeting of the 21st of February. I'd just like to run through some housekeeping before we kick off into our agenda this morning. Can I explain that this meeting is being recorded and will be live streamed onto the Council's YouTube channel? Health and safety requirements in the Council chamber are shown on our screens. The meeting point in any unlikely case of an emergency is under the clock tower in Marae or Hine. All online participants, if you can keep your cameras turned on and your microphones muted, and introduce yourself when you're about to speak. If you can text in any amendments to the committee administrators, and refer to the run sheet for the submitters in today's hearings. Thank you. If we can now open, can I call on Councillor Zebulon to open us with karakia? Kia ora.
Tū taua mai I runga, tū taua mai I raro, tū taua mai I roto, tū taua mai I waho. Kia tau ai te mauri tū, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumie, huie, tae kie.
Thank you, Councillor Zebulon. That moves us now to the apologies, and we do have apologies from Councillor Lorna Johnson for late arrival. Can I also just acknowledge, while not members of our committee, Councillor Rachel Bowen has given her apologies for non-attendance, and Councillor Marshall Lobb, which is our Deputy Mayor, for the early part of our session. And if we run into the afternoon, intends to be present. But as our non-members, we don't need to note them in this recommendation. I'll move the apologies. Are there any others before we take a vote? Councillor Naylor, happy to second the apologies, and I'll invite the vote. That's passed unanimously, 11 votes for. Item 3 is notification of items, which there are none. Item 4 is declarations of interest. Are there any? There being none, that moves us to item 5, public comment. We've had no indication of additional comments in items relating to our order paper outside of our hearing. So that does move us to our first hearing of submissions, which is the draft Palmerston North Animal and Bees Bylaw 2024. Those that are scheduled and wish to be heard, we have a list of submitters. You will have a time limit, which we've got or not. We'll put the clock up on the screen that will just indicate your time allowance, which is 10 minutes, and that it does include questions from members. But otherwise, if you come to the table and just introduce yourself, and if you have any additional information, the administrators can circulate that to members. So the first presenter is an online participant. Okay, thank you. I'll need to move both the recommendations before us, which is that the Strategy and Finance Committee hear submissions from presenters who indicated their wish to be heard in support of their submission, and 2, that the committee note the procedures of the hearing of submissions as described in the procedure sheet. I'll move that. Seconded by Councillor Naylor, our Deputy Chair, and invite a vote. That is passed unanimously, votes for. Moving into the submitters, the first participant is online, Amelia Geary, representing Royal Forest and Bird Protection Society of New Zealand Incorporated. Submission on page number 228 for members, submission number 23. Floor is yours, Amelia. Welcome.
Thank you very much for hearing me. I just wanted to start by pointing out that it would be useful for these hearings to be held after everyone's received an officer's report so that we can understand what you'll be deliberating on, and then we can add our submission, added points to that. I've attended a lot of hearings on this exact topic, and it's not particularly helpful to be submitting in person so close to the close of the deadline when the council officers haven't had time to deliberate on what we've said and come to a recommendation so that we can then comment. So I'd just like to make that a statement. And yeah, you're not the only council that does it like this, but I would suggest that it's not a particularly great way to do it. And I'd be happy to talk to council staff about my experience and what I would suggest would be a useful process. And then secondly, so on that, I don't have a lot to add because I support what the officer's report is proposing, which is to reduce the age of desexing down to 4 months. That's the recommended age by many professional organisations like the SPCA and so on. And I just really wanted to draw your attention to the fact that these bylaws are only as effective as the funding put into them. And so a strong thrust of Forest and Bird submission was on funding this regulatory aspect of the council. And to just run you through one example that I think is, well, in fact, it's probably the only good example in the country. And that's from Wellington City Council, which I explained in my submission, but I just thought I'd outline it a bit clearer. And I've done a lot of these hearings, and so I'm quite happy to take questions and be interactive because, as I've said, I don't have a lot more to add than what I said in my original submission. But only to say that Wellington City Council has a staff member that they dedicate to cat management. She's part of the compliance team. She's in the within the dog animal control team. And she only works 2 days a week, and she's partnered with a shelter. So a big barrier that councils put up is the fact that they believe they need to build facilities to hold the cats, which is not true in the case of Wellington. They have partnered with a shelter who already had the facilities, and they've got a statement, what's it called? An SOP, statement, what's that called? Standard operating procedure that they've agreed to with the shelter. And it's just a really effective relationship. The shelter knows how to care for the cats, but the council officer comes with the delegated authority of the council to take the cats and manage them accordingly. So yeah, I just thought I'd point out that it wouldn't be too hard for Palmerston North to take a proactive stance on cat management in the city, and that there are good examples in existence in the country. And yeah, would encourage you to talk to Wellington City Council, basically. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. I don't have a lot more to add. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. We do have a question to kick us off. Councillor Naylor.
Thanks, Amelia, for your submission. You commented at the beginning about wanting officers' report to come out before the verbal submission, the oral submissions. Now, the officers' report is a summary of the written and the oral submissions, so that they wait for that in its completeness before they respond to that. Are you suggesting that they should write a report before hearing the full submissions? Is that what you...
Yes. So in my experience, as a submitter, I have no idea what everyone else has said. And so it's very useful for me to understand the context that you councillors are entering into when it comes time to hearing. So then I can comment on the broader scope of submissions and add any perhaps points of value that I didn't necessarily consider because I, didn't see the wider submissions. And yeah, I appreciate your point about the officers summarising the hearings as well, but I feel like we've said what we wanted to say in our submissions. That is the the most important part, and the hearings is just additional to help add value to the officer's report.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Thank you. There are no further questions, Amelia, so thank you. Oh, okay, you went on the queue. Okay, Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Apologies for jumping in at the last moment. Thanks, Amelia, for joining us online. Was just interested around your views in terms of the balance, if we were to invest in some resource around this bylaw, kind of the balance between the educational opportunities that might be there in the community versus the kind of straight out monitoring enforcement type stuff.
Yeah, great question. I say it in every hearing that Forest and Bird doesn't expect the council to become the cat police. We're not expecting you to go door to door, knocking on people's doors saying, how many cats have you got? Is it desexed? Are you compliant with the bylaw? That's not the approach that we would be encouraging. And obviously you recognise that that's not the ideal approach to enforcement generally anyway. So the balance would probably come from, I would say, at least assuming you did decide to put budget to this, I would say socialising the bylaw would be the critical element first. Telling people that, look, we've done this thing and look, we've changed it and it's down to 4 months for desexing, for example, to let people know that it exists. Wanganui has a really good bylaw, but they didn't do anything to socialise the fact that they even had a bylaw, and it's made no material difference to the cat problem in Wanganui. And I can give you plenty of examples of that happening around the country. So letting people know that this bylaw exists and basic expectations of residents of Palmerston North would be a really good start. And then any kind of budget towards, I mean, if you wanted to go down the route of Wellington, they actually have an officer clearing out all the stray colonies in Wellington City. So they're targeting unowned cats, stray cats, and rehoming them so that they don't pose a nuisance in the city. And it's not prohibitive, it's not a costly expense. And it's also, you know, you haven't seen front page news from Wellington about this being some outrageous thing the council's doing. No, it's not a problem. People are on board with this because it's good for the cats and it's good for the nuisance being controlled and the health hazard posed by unowned cats.
Thanks, Amelia. If I can follow up as well, just interested in terms of the society's awareness in terms of where the kind of sources of cat problems are versus where the impacts are. So are the impacts also quite close to urban areas, or is it more that it feeds out into the conservation estate?
Oh, it very much depends on where in the country you're talking. So obviously in city situations, the stray cat colonies typically live around dumps, landfills, places like that where they can scavenge food, and then they spread out into the neighbouring landscape to hunt if the landfill doesn't provide. They also tend to fill, you know, lots, empty lots in urban situations, and again, if numbers get high, then that poses a definite nuisance. However, yeah, in more rural places, in Taranaki, for example, cat dumping is a real problem. So they are obviously breeding in urban situations, and people don't want to deal with the cats, the kittens, or the inflated number of cats. So they take them out into rural situations and dump them. And we have real problems with that with our South Taranaki branch of Forest and Bird that often catches cats encroaching into their trapping and conservation operations. So yeah, it depends where you're talking, but certainly I would say in Palmerston North, you've got a mixture of rural and urban. And so the nuisance isn't limited to just the city.
Thank you. Much appreciated, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. You've mentioned cat limit per household, and you've mentioned Wellington a few times. Do they have a limit in Wellington?
They don't actually. They've just notified their bylaw. They've just done a review. They're in exactly the same position as you folks are right now. They've added an additional provision for mandatory desexing. Previously, it was just microchipping, but no, they didn't go as far as adding a limit.
Okay, that's a shame. They've obviously got a lot more bush around them than us. Thank you.
Yeah, indeed.
Thank you, Amelia. There's no further questions for you. So thank you. You're more than welcome to stay online and listen to the other presenters.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Can I note that James Beard is not in the gallery to present his submission, and if he comes subsequently before we conclude this part of the meeting, I'll tag at the end. But that does mean that we have the Palmerston North Youth Council, and we have Tyler and Isaac, and I'll welcome you both forward. This is submission number 24, and it's page 232.
Kia ora ngā kai kaunihira, ko Tyler tōku ingoa, kei konei ahau me Isaac, he māngai mō te kaunihira rangatahi o Papaioia. I tēnei rā ka kōrero tātou mō ngā whakarereketanga mō Kararehe me Pairua. Kia ora councillors, my name is Tyler and it is my pleasure to be here with Isaac, representing the Palmer Youth Council to speak on PNCC's proposed changes to the Animal and Bees bylaw. While we agree with the Council's key reason for the proposal to reduce nuisance to the public as indicated in page 3 of the purpose of Animals and Bees bylaw section, we also believe that important areas of the bylaw could have greater concern for animal welfare. We believe that more specific requirements for keeping pigs based on expert opinion can result in greater protection of animal welfare.
As mentioned in our submission, the Youth Council originally had some reservations about lowering the cat desexing age from 6 months to 4. This was mostly from concern that desexing a cat at 4 months might harm the cat. However, after careful consideration and research into the Code of Welfare Companion Cats 2018, we concluded that this change poses no harm to cats. As such, we have come to support this clause and believe that it will help support Palmerston North's cat population management plan and reduce nuisance behaviours such as spraying.
With that in mind, the Palmer Youth Council also acknowledges that the well-being of the cat can only be maintained if the well-being of the owner is maintained. It would be helpful to note that lowering the cat's desexing age might not necessarily stop all nuisance behaviours that occur, because during a cat's puberty, like spraying and overpopulation, if people aren't given the incentive to get their cats fixed, oftentimes people cannot get their cats desexed for financial reasons or otherwise.
The Palmer Youth Council have concerns about the wording of clause 10.1a. In our submission, we touched on what these concerns were. Primarily, the phrasing is sufficient in size to allow the pig to stand, turn, and lie down in a natural position. We feel that this leaves a lot to be desired in terms of pig welfare. Having a pigsty that is only the size of the pig itself could be detrimental to the welfare of the pig, both mentally and physically, as pigs are incredibly intelligent and social animals. According to the RSPCA, United Kingdom, a lack of space for pigs can lead to aggression, chronic stress, and impaired mobility, among other negative health effects. We believe a potential solution to help uphold animal welfare is to introduce specific area and perimeter requirements for the size of the pigsty that owners should be required to have. After careful research, we found that the SPCA New Zealand recommends a waterproof and sheltered area and a large shelter space big enough to house multiple pigs. Further advice is provided by the RSPCA United Kingdom, who recommend a living space of at least 6 metres squared per pig, or ideally a larger space. In both cases, these pigsties would exceed the area a typical pig would require to stand, turn around, and so forth. As such, to ensure the needs and welfare of pigs are maintained, it would be ideal if something similar to the 6 metre squared recommendation were to be included in the Animals and Bees bylaw changes to support the needs of pigs.
Finally, we propose that an additional subclause is included under clause 10.1 regarding bedding for pigs. Although some pig owners may use common sense or pig-owning knowledge to ensure that pigs are provided with suitable bedding, it leaves too much up to chance. We believe that there should be a subclause specifying straw or straw-like material as the required bedding for pigsties. The NZSPCA provides clear advice. Quote, ensure that there is clean, fresh, deep bedding such as straw or hay in the sleeping area, and don't forget to top the bedding up and clean it out when needed, end quote. Using this type of bedding ensures that the pigs stay clean and safe in their living environments and don't overheat. Introducing a subclause that ensures all pigs' needs are protected will be an important step forward in animal welfare. Stock and poultry are vital industries and provide economic opportunities. However, sometimes when home kill happens, considerations of other people might go overlooked, and the proposed changes ensure that the necessary precautions to public safety are in place. The proposal has included a range of common sense type clauses which would make sure that nuisance is kept to a minimum. The PNYC unanimously agrees with this proposal.
Thank you, councillors, for taking the time to listen to us. We would now love to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson, floor's yours.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your submission, and I'm sorry that I arrived halfway through it. But I'm grateful that you took the time to look into some of the recommendations from the SPCA. Would you be comfortable if we reflected the codes of animal welfare in our bylaws? Are you familiar with the codes of welfare that are published by the government?
Yeah, I think we would be comfortable if those were reflected in the bylaw, but we would also like it noted that non-profit organisations also do play a part in making sure that animal welfare is upheld.
Yes, okay, thank you. Are you aware of the role that the SPCA plays in determining the codes of animal welfare?
I can't say that we are entirely,
Okay.
no.
All right, thank you for that.
Thank you. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Youth Council. It's great to see you in the chamber. Just a question, given you've proposed we have a prescription of the bedding for pigs in our policy, I was wondering if you would have a similar feeling to the prescription of bedding for other animals that are reflected in the policy, or if it's just specifically pigs you have concern about.
In terms of the bedding, we think that it is especially important for animals like pigs to receive suitable bedding, considering they are prone to overheating and their sweat glands make it so that it's very difficult to live in overheated conditions rather. But also it is an important consideration perhaps for other animals, however they don't have the same need necessarily as pigs.
Thank you, and just a follow-up question. It's apparent you put a lot of research into this proposal. I was just interested if you researched what any other councils had under their bylaws, if this is something similar that you've seen reflected in other areas, or if this is something new and unique that we would be doing if we had this kind of prescription.
We don't have any knowledge about any other councils that have this specific subclause in terms of bedding and space for pigs. However, we do think that it would be a step forward as it's been recommended by the RSPCA UK and SPCA.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of questions. Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Isaac. Firstly was appreciated what you've shared with us from an animal welfare perspective in terms of the bylaw and its outcomes. I just wondered if the Youth Council had given any consideration around kind of biodiversity outcomes that might be associated with the bylaw, and if you had any perspectives around the kind of biodiversity angles.
I'm sorry, Councillor Barrett, could you be potentially more specific?
For instance, the relationship between better control of nuisance and feral cats and kind of the relationship with bird numbers in either the city or in the conservation areas near the city.
Absolutely. Lowering cat nuisance behaviours and making sure that our population is controlled would definitely have a positive effect on conservation areas around Palmerston North.
Thank you. I guess I'm trying to understand a little bit of the nature of the deliberations within the Youth Council. Like, were you kind of discussing across both welfare and biodiversity things, and you kind of landed on welfare, or did you really just zoom in there straight away?
We did discuss both, but I think welfare was the main point that we discussed.
Right. Cool. That's helpful understanding the context to where you got to. My second question was just really around how you found the process of engaging with the bylaw, preparing a submission, et cetera. Is there anything that would have made that process easier or more enjoyable from the Youth Council's perspective?
As our first submission of the year, it was something new, but we definitely did, we tried our best to engage with the youth through polls on our social media page and such. We don't have the exact numbers on there right now, but we ensured to engage with the youth of Palmerston North, and we also were representative of the youth in our own ideas as Youth Council. I think that the submission process was rather smooth.
I think what might have made it easier is if we could have put both of our names onto the submission so that it was acknowledged that more than one of us would be submitting verbally in the chambers today.
Cool, thank you for those answers. That's helpful perspective, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you to you both, Tyler and Isaac, for presenting today. There's no further questions. Again, ngā mihi.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillors.
That brings us on to, excuse me, Helen King, representing Environment Network Manawatu. And that's for the order paper on page 241, and it's submission number 29. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'll start again. Kia ora, and thank you very much for the opportunity to submit today. I'm going to be talking from a biodiversity point of view on behalf of Environment Network Manawatu's Ruahine Kiwi project. Just a brief overview, which is obviously written down already for you. Ruahine Kiwi is working with stakeholders and partners to trap pests effectively, increase biodiversity in the Ruahine ranges to the point where we can reintroduce kiwi in 2026, which is a wonderful dream that we are well on the way to achieving. We have about 1,870 traps out there, and we've trapped about 5,000 plus pests at this point, which is quite the achievement. Our core thing that we need to catch to reintroduce kiwi is mustelids, and we've caught about 492 of these. But as the project's gone on, and it's now 2.5 years in, what we've been increasingly cognizant of is the amount of feral cats that are out there and the amount of them we're having to trap. On my submission, I said that we had trapped 53 cats in our area. Talking to our trappers, it's now up to 70. So we are very supportive in this case of early desexing at the 4-month level that the council is talking about, and also limiting cat numbers. It's very clear to us that people come and dump their cats in rural areas, and this is having a flow-on effect to our projects and to a lot of the farmers as well who are participating in our projects on the lower areas of land that we work into. And you know, it's animal welfare too. I'm a cat owner. I love my cats, and the thought of cats being dumped in that way is quite horrific, and what they have to go with and survive as. And note that we are just trapping feral cats. We're incredibly careful about how we do that, incredibly careful. So we are very supportive of these changes because we understand the effects that cats can have on our native and endemic biodiversity, and kind of minimising this effect is very important to our project and many of the other projects that are going on in the Ruahine ranges as well. That's pretty much all I want to say, just supporting those aspects I've noted in our submission. And I'm very happy to answer questions, just noting that I am not a trapper. So if there's something I can't answer comfortably, I am more than happy to go back and find the answer for you. I don't look like a trapper, do I, today, for sure?
Thank you. Councillor Zebulon.
Ngā mihi, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Helen. I noted in your submission you said that you're not funded, or the Ruahine Kiwi Association is not funded to do this kind of trapping work. What sort of resource is it requiring from the trust?
We had to seek, I mean, our current contract is with DOC under Jobs for Nature, and the priority is mustelids. That's what they fund us for. So understanding it was a problem, we sought some external funding to buy traps to be spread across both areas of our project in order to do that. It does require resourcing. It does require people resourcing as well, because of course those traps need to be promptly checked and emptied as well. And we do deploy cameras to watch the traps as well, and to watch the areas where we put the traps, so we can make sure they're in the right place to trap the right animals too. So yeah, it's external funding for that for us.
Thank you. That's all from me.
Thank you. Councillor Wood.
Thank you. Just one question from me. Thank you for your support of the changes we're trying to make. I was just interested in your view if there was anything else we could be doing to go further in regards to this bylaw to support reducing the number of feral cats.
I totally agree with what Amelia said. It's all well and good making these laws, but it's how it's actually resourced and what's actually done about that. My personal suspicion is that the law itself probably won't change some people's behaviour, but perhaps a greater understanding of what resources are out there for people who need to desex their cats, and good publicity and education around it would be the best way forward in helping reduce that as well.
Thank you, appreciate that. Thank you, Mr Chair.
Thank you. There's no further questions, Helen. Thank you very
Thank you
much
so
for
much.
coming in this morning
Thank
and
you.
speaking to your submission. That moves us on to Jenny Doyle. Is Jenny Doyle here? Yeah, welcome. This is submission on page number 222, and the submission number is 21. Welcome.
Hello. Right, just put on. Right. Thank you for having me to come to speak. I'm not normally, I'm not generally a speaker, so a little bit nervous. I am speaking this morning because I am against the council's proposed bylaw to reduce the age of desexing cats. I question your reasonings for this because I don't believe our council's proposal, for all intents and purposes, has the best interest of cats or their responsible owners at heart. Early desexing is already happening, as I've said as we all know, through all the SPCAs, all the rescue organisations around New Zealand. In fact, they're actually desexing often earlier. They are all desexed before they, become adopted out. And that seems to go for puppies as well, which is quite a concern. So, bearing in mind, I am all about desexing cats and stopping, the overpopulation, the nuisance, the spreading, the colonies of cats that we seem to have in every city, because I did found Manawatu Alley Cats with the support of just a handful of people back in 2016, and the solution then was not picked up by the council, and that is supporting organisations which I'm not criticising, but not even the SPCA would support voluntary people coming together to try and tackle the stray and unwanted cats that were accumulating in the city, as they do everywhere, if they're not, seen to and trapped, desexed, and rehoming the kittens to responsible owners. So, for me, it's always been about education, I feel it's just been a blanket, it's response, and, it's just not, I'm sorry, I'm just losing it now. Look, I'll just go on, I'll come back to that later. But look, I just want to look at your reasonings that are in your proposal. The first one being that cats may reach puberty at any time after 4 months of age. Now, a 4-month pregnant kitten is an absolute exception to the rule. It's all about education and common sense that is needed here. All growing kittens are at least 6 months, even up to 8 months, before their first spring season hits. And that is when they come into their first heat, estrus cycle. It all depends how early in the summer they're born. If they're born in November or December or January, they have a lot more months to develop properly to maturity before spring, their first spring hits, and that's when they come into their heat cycle and will become pregnant. So, and it is possible for a 4-month-old kitten, 5 months, but very rare. And it's only if they are born later in the year, up to May, where they only have 4 months, 5 at most, before spring hits. And that's the facts around absolute physiological, for them. So, one size doesn't fit all. And the fact that these cats have been desexed so early, for so long, through every organisation in the SPCA, it has not quelled the cat problem. The solution is education and giving the SPCAs the funding to target the irresponsible owners, who don't have the means, the brains, or the money to look after their cats. They let them have litter after litter, and of course, this is obvious. I mean, I'm speaking, already what you already know. So in terms of understanding kittens' physiology and that it means instead of new owners being fear-mongered into having their newly brought home kitten desexed so unnecessary early, they can use their noodle and understand that it's perfectly safe for them to wait, allowing their kitten to mature and healthily develop as they should. Because it's all about having a healthy cat, which they don't have to drag to the vet every 5 minutes. And, it's that is the reality. So, and your other thing, desexing cats at 4 months or before puberty reduces the likelihood of some nuisance behaviours occurring which can be objectionable to people, spraying, straying and vocalising. Well, that's a description of a fully developed tomcat. It's ridiculous, and it's not, it's completely unfounded. So, the so-called, I looked up on the MPI's Code of Welfare on Companion Cats, which, you say provides detailed research. It does not. And on the so-called health and welfare benefits of desexing cats at 4 months or earlier, there are no substantial benefits for this age, only the possible risk of detrimental health issues and vet costs down the line for them and their owners. And I believe this is what's creating a backfire. People are dumping their cats because they can't afford to have them to the vets because they're sick, they get neglected, and the more irresponsible people will just dump them back into the community or out in the rural, which is terrible. So, the premature removal of their reproductive organs means loss of essential growth hormones. I don't see why people don't understand that. And this supports the development of their healthy musculoskeletal growth, strength in collagen, nerves, immunity, and has a role in thyroid function, brain development. Observational definitely shows of smaller heads, slightly longer leg lengths, spindlier and less bone mass, and early prepubertal desexing, and a definite irrefutable weight gain, which has its own health issues. And as someone that's been rescuing cats and have just a few of my own still from those days, they are a perfect example. They were desexed later 8 or 9 months. The girls 7 to 8 months, depending on when they were born. I've never had a litter of kittens from them. And they're well looked after, and they never need to go to the vets apart from the odd teeth check now, because, you know, as they're getting older. So I just want to say, and you know, your other reasoning, of course, is Desetsing supports the ongoing cat population management in Palmerston North, you know, to prevent unwanted breeding. If it is the council's genuine concern to quell our cat population and unwanted litters, your proposed insistence of early desetsing as a mandatory blanket proposal, it is already in place, as we already know. But despite this, we still have the issue of neglect, abandon and stray cats because of irresponsible people. The solution is always and should have been to support our SPCAs with the funding to enable, as I said before, to target and police the real culprits who never adhere to rules around owning a pet, nor does a sort of vet care enter their vocabulary. As a nation, there are no regulations around restricting or banning of carte blanche, online, backyard, puppy farm and kitten sellers who are just pumping these animals out with no consideration or care as to who they're going to. So at a national level, this should be addressed. Council's proposal...
Jenny, can I just prompt you? We have extended time.
Okay.
If you could just maybe go to closing comments.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
I think the proposal could only serve to be unpoliceable, especially among the bad owners. This is not a solution at all. All it would do is to assign more cats to undeniable health problems and vet visits, put more stress and costs on responsible people. We do not need to be told how and what to do with our pets. We are not and never have been the problem. So I think it is a bit of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So, yeah, anyway, so I hope it makes sense.
Yes, thank you, Jenny. Thank you for your submission and being here today to speak to it. Unfortunately, time is out, and there were members with questions, but you covered your points very well. Thank you. There are no further speakers in this part of the hearing, so that concludes the hearing of animal and bee bylaw. So we'll now move into the next hearing, which is the hearing of submissions for the draft Palmerston North dog control policy, which is item 7. And I'll need to move the following recommendations: that the Strategy and Finance Committee hear submissions from presenters who indicated their wish to be heard in support of their submission, and 2, that the committee note the procedures for the hearing of submissions as described in the procedural sheet. I'll move that, seconded by Councillor Naylor, and invite a vote. That's passed 12 votes for unanimously. Thank you. Moving into the submitters to be heard in support of their submissions. As outlined, there is 10 minutes allocated per submitter, and that includes time for questions from members. The first submitter is from Tone of the Gods, my apologies, submission number 43. Not my height, am I? Come forward. I'm just going to refer to that. That is page, submitter number 43. 90. Thank you, members. Page 90.
Just push this one here, is it?
Hello? Yes, you're on.
Yeah. Well, ultimately, I was just wanting to, there was
Sir, if I just get you to introduce your name as
Jason Dawn, yeah.
Yes.
So that was my business thing.
Yes.
Ultimately, I just wanted to make a point of the breed-specific legislation. Not sure if that wasn't a main focus. It was on the dog control, but it seems to be around the menacing dogs situations and identification of. Everybody seems to be very confused in regards to that situation and what it actually means. You can go online and, forums, Facebook, everywhere, Palmerston North and around the country in regards to what that actually means. And I don't think it's very clear. It's just, it was like almost a majority were unsure what it actually meant because of the, there's a couple of breeds on a list. I think it's only like 3 breeds that actually really have a focus around the country of councils and what they are, called ban breeds in a sense. But a couple of them, like say a pit bull, no one can identify one. And you go to account the dog ranger and everything like that, and yet there's a couple of other breeds that look exactly the same. And that's, I think, needs to be somehow outlined. I don't know how that can happen because it's like everyone gets it wrong. Sort of like myself, a reason that came up for me, I was looking everywhere online and everyone seems confused at what these breeds are, what are you talking about, sort of thing. You're walking down the street, hey, someone says, oh, hi, nice such and such dog you got. And it's completely the wrong dog they think that's walking down the street. So it's, I think it was quite important because there was there's some areas specific like South Auckland and that were really targeted because they had a big population of some of these strong breeds that were not controlled, they're wandering around and stuff like that. That was happening. So this thing got situation in councils got very focused on rounding up these unchipped or just dogs that were roaming, and it happened to be certain types of breeds that happened to be the ones that are getting picked up all the time. A lot of them was in South Auckland, and it got that got the big they had the big drive, free registration, vaccination, chipping and all that sort of stuff. It was going on in that area. And reason I brought it up is the fact that I have an American Staffordshire and he looks exactly the same as an American pit bull, and pretty much 95% of everyone in the street would get it wrong. And so it just came to my mind, I had to put this forward because of the fact that it where's the clarity on around dog control on the basis of this breed specific, because it seemed to have big focuses in different councils and some councils weren't even looking at it. So and that it's been going on for a long time, and as we all learned, that the breed specific legislation all around the world was a complete failure. For one thing, no one knew which breed was supposed to be outlawed. They had a focus on, oh, here, look at this dog. Yet it's not on the list because it's nothing to do with this dog, but they look the same. So I think there needs to be some sort of clarity, or I don't know how to go about, or what sort of system needs to be put in place in that. I think it's as I stated, it's all well known about the breed specific was a complete failure. What they tried all around the world and stuff, and because of that situation, some dogs are getting picked up that weren't even in that breed, which they focused on, and then it was just a big storm at all that council on that because they picked up a dog that wasn't that. They protest outside. Hey, what do you pick this dog up? Oh, it's a pit bull or whatever other type of breed on a list, and so that's the clarity I think I was after, and I think that should be looked at with somehow to nut that out to find out what sort of clarity and policies can be put forward to have the public more clarity on that. Because it's all over the net. It's all over the net in every country. But when you look around New Zealand, everyone was confused online. They didn't know what they were talking about, and no fault of theirs. So that's a very, I thought that was quite an important one, because I mean, I walk my dog every day. I do about 10 Ks a day or something like that with him, and he's well known all around town, but no one knows what he is, you know, and he's not on the list, but he looks, you know, very similar. To a pit bull, but he's an American Staffy, and he's not on the list. He's like number 75, miles away, the friendliest dog ever. But you know, in the mind of a certain person who maybe have read a council document on certain things, they'll cross the road. Yet they can come up and give them a cuddle, but with this fear situation going on, so it's people in people's minds. They got very confused about that. I don't have the answer for it, but it's I think it needs to be looked at. I mean, some councils have got a lot worse situation, like saying that it's been on the news a lot, the South Auckland there, but there was just a lot of roaming dogs. So some got to focus on, because it just happened to be, some breeds happened to be a majority. That were the ones getting picked up. So that was the focus and got put into policy and stuff. It's not highly enforced, but it's in the policies. So I didn't even know what Palmerston North does it have breed-specific legislation, but it's just worded differently. I don't know what's the focus. You see, that was unclear. So I think that needs to be, clarified and sort of maybe in line with a national thing, because it's definitely not national situation going on. That was the main point I wanted to make today, because that seemed to be just up in the air.
Great, thank you, Jason. I'll open up if there's any questions.
Yeah.
There are no questions. Thank you for covering that point. No questions? Thank you for covering your point very clearly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. That moves us to our submission number 58, Paul Godbez. Welcome along again, and this is on page 118 for members.
Good morning, everyone. I'll introduce myself. I'm Paul Godbez. I was born in this city over 80 years ago, and I have owned dogs, all registered, since 1972. None of those dogs, myself excepted, have ever had problems except when they have been attacked by other dogs. My dogs have never, ever attacked anybody. They are trained well. But at the present moment, the real gripe I've got after going to the initial meeting and then putting in a submission to this group is the fact that this new draft is because there is obviously a problem, something that's wanted to be changed. If it's not being changed, well, that proves there's no problem. But where, in my case, one of the biggest problems is you can make any rules you like, but if you're not prepared to enforce them or employ competent people to enforce or police them, it's a waste of time. I personally, at the present moment, am having a session with dog control. We have a problem where I live in Seddon Street with 3 dogs on one property, all of a bull terrier type, that are left outside in the front yard behind a 40-year-old 2-inch wide trellis. A lower part of it does have some bird netting on it, but these dogs constantly come out and attack, but don't actually get at people walking past. It has come to a stage that when I want to come out my drive, because I live behind this house, when I come out my drive to go to my dairy, which is 150 metres down the road, I actually have to cross my other neighbour's culvert, get on the other side of the road, walk down the street, cross another street, and then back across the street again to get to the shop, because those bloody dogs are hassling me. And if I've got my little dog with me, he reacts. He's scared of them, but he's very brave. The neighbours are absolutely scared of him. We in my area have a high number of non-New Zealand born people, and a lot of them don't have vehicles. They walk down there and they get really spooked by these 3 dogs that are completely out of control. My initial report of them, after I'd put up with it for quite a while, was on the 27th of December when I emailed council. I got absolutely nowhere. There was no reply. The first reply I had to council, after another 3 emails reminding them, was on the 9th of January, when a dog ranger rang me at about 8:30 in the morning and said that he was coming round. He said, and I usually go walking with my little dog in the morning, so I said, I will stay in to see you, to tell you and show you exactly what the problem is, the problem which we want fixed. He never turned up. I stayed there all morning waiting for him. I went inside to get my lunch ready at 11:45, and I found out on my computer that at 9:30 he had actually texted me, emailed me saying that he had called to the place. There was nobody there, so he presumed the dogs were inside. I got back to him because on his email he identified him. I also identified him because I know of the guy and I know of his history when he got booted out of dog control in Wanganui years ago. I have heard absolutely nothing from them since. They're not interested. If they are not going to be part of the solution, they are obviously a major part of the problem. They have to be sorted out. They have to be re-educated. And in past, I know this is getting back in the past, but at the time of this attack on me, I called the ranger, because I live on my own, just with a little dog. I called the ranger. He turned up, this was a number of years ago, went to the neighbour who owned the dog that had jumped over a fence, and he uplifted the dog. Then he came and saw me to get my side of the story. I always thought that in most courts and any inquiry, you hear the complaint so that you know what you're going to get. Defence. You go to any court, the prosecution's evidence is given first, and then the defence knows what they are defending. The particular dog involved in this instance here, as I say, he was picked up, had taken away, 11 o'clock next morning, it was back without a muzzle, being walked up and down my place by the dog's owner and his mother-in-law, and they were barking at me. Not the dog, the people. A couple of days later, I rang the council because that same dog had been taken unmuzzled and was off a lead playing in the playground at the Gloucester Street Reserve. I did see a grey council vehicle go past, which had it had city council, because we weren't Palmy then. Never came and saw me. But I did find out after doing research that the reason why that dog was released back, even though it should have been classed as dangerous, because it had actually inflicted physical, irrefutable wounds on me. The owner was in the same whānau as Mr. Graham,
Sorry, if I could just...
the ranger.
If I could just pause you there, some of the accounts that you're giving are accusations against our staff that can't defend themselves in this hearing. So as chair, I need to just mention that your detailing and naming of staff is inappropriate, actually, and I need to curb any further use of that.
Right,
specific.
I will just use the connotation ranges. I believe that some of them, unnamed, are doing exactly what they want to do and not doing what they should do. Councils, ranging staff, need a re-education program. And I am prepared to be a part of that if need be. I offer my services. I have, during my employment periods, been in some very important positions. I was an area manager for BP in Wanganui. I have been a compliance auditor for Caltex Oil in the Manawatu, Rangitikei, Hawke's Bay areas, and I have also done work for firms like Telecom and Westpac Bank. I have been entrusted with that type of stuff. I know a lot about staff training and what should be respected for employees dealing with the public. They have to improve their image, and if they want to do their own thing, we are not going to get over some of the problems we have in town. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, Paul. Thank you for your submission and being here today to speak to it. There's no further time for questions, but we've noted and have read your submission, and that will be considered when we do the final deliberations. Thank you. That moves us on to submitter number 62, which is Morris Job, page 128 for members. Welcome forward.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Morris Job. I'm a resident of the city, and I became aware of this process because I'm a registered dog owner. I have owned dogs most of my life, since I was a youngster. I firmly believe and support council's proposals in terms of the management of so-called dangerous dogs. Unfortunately, identifying breeds as dangerous per se is, I think, risky, because dogs are inherently dangerous individually. There are, I believe, more attacks inflicted on people by terriers and Labradors than there are by pit bulls across the country. So care needs to be taken there, but I support what's being done. My submission is about the preferred owner scheme. And a brief history, I'll keep this quite brief. I moved to Manawatu in 1987, bringing a dog with me. Since then, I've owned in total 4 more dogs. Never once have these animals been cause for valid complaint. I've had one spurious complaint about barking or have been impounded. In 2022, my wife and I moved from Fielding to Palmerston North, bringing one desexed dog with us. In Fielding, registration of that dog cost $30. In Hawke's Bay, registration off their website costs $56. Tararua District Council, it's $114. Horowhenua would cost me $80. Last year, registering my dog cost, I think it was $122, and I understand it's going up this year. That's already been intimated. In this submission, I separate the elected council from the council staff. My opinion is the elected council is here to implement the wishes of the owners of the city, the rate and rent payers, and in doing so to manage the employed PNCC staff in their roles, their duties and their expectations. More than once I have encountered the attitude from council employees that council owns the city and sets the rules. I repeat, the owners of the city are the ratepayers. We are PNCC's customers. I'm aware of the new animal pound that is or has been constructed and the eye-watering cost of it. I'm sure it is a grand facility. It would need to be for over $7 million. To me, this is an example of city employees not having expectations managed to meet the needs and the means of their customers. The given answer is always simple. Rates and charges will have to be increased. It's an example, as far as I'm concerned, where you must cut your suit to fit your cloth. In this example, I don't believe it was. I realise that project is all but complete. It's a little late to complain about it, but it's an example. Rate and rent payers are not a bottomless well of money. Too many are struggling to survive, and this level of charge that we're facing with dog registration is not sustainable for many people. I repeat, my dogs have never been brought to the attention of animal control. So what am I getting for my dollars? I submit that I get very little, if anything. I previously, in the 1980s, had preferred owner status in Palmerston North. I don't remember what the charges were back then. Now I find I have to submit to a multi-page exam, pay a $60 fee. What do I get for this? A $30 reduction in fees. There's no incentive. So to return to my submission, the preferred owner scheme is of no value to an owner, so why do it? Further, the high cost of registration has little or no value to a compliant owner who abides by the rules. So why pay them? And I think many do not, and I'm considering that same action. There is no incentive for good owners, and there is no incentive for those who do not follow rules to adhere to them. There is no recognition of those who have limited means in the form of reduced charges, pensioners and low income earners. I don't see any concessions. Okay, so that's my simple statement. Questions?
Thank you very much. We do have questions. Councillor Naylor.
Thanks for your submission. Now, I'm interested in understanding your comments around that you don't believe that dog owners or animal owners should be having to pay the costs of animal control. I'm just interested, because there clearly are some costs to council for animal control. Who do you think should be paying for those costs?
I think the offenders. Simply.
Okay.
If your dog is impounded, your dog is picked up by a ranger, I think the fee should be, make it an incentive to keep your dog under control.
Okay. And if those offenders also have income-related challenges, would you still suggest that they should be the ones paying for that?
Yes, I do. Because I'm a pensioner, but I keep my dog under control.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments.
Councillor Finlay?
Thank you. I am also a dog owner and a preferred dog owner. You say that yours was $100 and something registration last year. So you wouldn't be a preferred dog owner?
No.
So that's the wide difference. Mine, I think, was 58.
I see a reduction in fees on the website of $30. So I'd love to know where you got down to 58, because I would be in.
That was a memory. It wasn't much more.
Yeah. The fee I think I saw on the website came from 122 to 92.
And you say that there's it's quite hard to become a preferred dog owner?
It's a process, yes. Yeah. It involves an online test, which is, it's quite a good way of doing education.
Yeah.
It involves time. Then I pay a $60 fee, which has to be paid by April to give council time to come and do the visit. They come and inspect the property. I see in the proposal that there will be more conditions attached to that, and I don't actually have a problem with that. What I have a problem with is that there is no financial incentive to do it. There is no incentive.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson?
Thanks, Mr Chair. Thanks, Morris, for coming in. Currently, we have, the council sets a policy on how much of the dog control costs should be recouped through registration fees. And at the moment, that policy is between 80 and 100% of the costs. So do you have a thought on how much of that policy should be recouped? You know, how much we should be recouping from dog owners?
No, I don't. That's a level of financial control I'm not familiar with. I believe that people who are responsible, who by the preferred owner scheme have been shown to be responsible, should not be having to subsidise those who don't. Where the costs for that dog control are going to come from, I don't really know. I have to confess, I don't have an answer to that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, there's one further question. Councillor Barrett?
Thank you, Mr Chair. Thanks, Morris. I guess to follow on a little bit from that line of questioning, do you have views on whether people that live in the community that don't own dogs should contribute to the overall cost of the management of dogs in the city?
No. So we have a problem. We have a problem that costs, and we have basically two, if you like, from as you have put it, we have two parts of the community who are not incurring those costs. One are the dog owners who are responsible, and the other are the people who do not own dogs. And both those groups would say, well, I don't see why I should pay. So I realise there's a problem, and I do not have the answer to it. What I'm saying is that if you want me to be a preferred owner and submit myself to that process and things, that there's got to be a reason to do it.
Yeah, understood. Thank you, Mr Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Morris. There's no further questions. Thank you for being here today to speak to your submission.
Thank you.
That moves us on to submission number 69, which is the Kelvin Grove Community Association, and invite John Charlton to come forward and in support Ross Linklater and Val Burr. Page 142, and there is a PowerPoint presentation.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to make this presentation. My name's John Charlton. I'm Treasurer and Hall Manager for Kelvin Grove Community Association. We have made a written submission, which I'm sure you've all read. Thank you very much. Further to that, I'd like to say as a community organisation, we are very aware through our Facebook page of the adverse impact of uncontrolled dogs have on residents' enjoyment of Linklater Park. This park was originally intended as a passive family for passive family recreation, not predominantly as a dog control exercise area covering 25 hectares. So we are therefore proposing that the regulation is amended to allow the council to designate a part of the park as a dog control area, a dog exercise area, as opposed to at the moment where the regulation actually states that the entire park open to the public is a dog exercise area. As Val will show later on, this is we have ample evidence to show that this is adversely affecting a large proportion of the people who use the park from a small minority of irresponsible dog owners. The area of the park that we are suggesting, this doesn't seem to be working.
Here we go.
No. Oh yes.
It's come to life.
It's come to life. There we are. The red area on that plan shows the entire area of the park, and the area which we suggest, although this can be defined by council resolution if the suggestion for the amendment is adopted, is the yellow area at the back, which is accessible from the new car park from Roberts Line, while the area nearest Kelvin Grove, which is the main area with children's playground and general public, there's barbecue areas and swing bridge and other things there. It's only for a controlled dog area for on-leash activities rather than dogs running around, although we're open to larger areas of the northern area of the park there, if that's what the council officers recommend. I will point out that this is a very low-cost option. Here's a couple of, you can't read them, but sorry of the quality of the slide there, but that's photographic evidence of a blood-stained shoe, is it?
I'm not sure what it was.
Anyway, so somebody who's bloodstains from a dog attack in the park, and you will see that whenever it does come up on our Facebook page, we normally get dozens of comments from other people who say, "Me too." People, we have brought this out with our council liaison officer, and he says, "Well, why don't people report them to the council?" The anecdotal evidence we have is people are far more concerned about keeping their children and small dogs safe and getting out of the way rather than getting enough information to be able to make a credible report to the council officers, to the dog control officers. And a lot of these attacks occur either early morning or late afternoon when dog control officers aren't normally working. So we would actually like to see dog control officers working somewhere between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m, please. Right, I'll now hand over to Ross and Val for further information. Ross.
Thank you, John, and thank you, councillors, for listening to our presentation. I obviously have had a lot to do with this park because I used to own it, and it is right adjoining land that we're currently farming. Dogs off lead in an uncontrolled area certainly poses a problem. Earlier on, I had occasions where a couple of dogs got in amongst my sheep. Luckily, the owners were in hot pursuit and no damage was done, and the fence was improved. However, there is a constant concern over particularly uncontrolled dogs off lead and the potential damage they can do. My son and his family were in the park the other day, and he witnessed a person who did have a dog on a lead, and somebody coming in the opposite direction along the path had two dogs off lead, which attacked the one that was on a lead. The end result was some fairly strong verbal discrimination between the two. However, that was where it stopped. But that's the sort of thing that can occur with dogs off lead. I've seen a little boy about 3 years old walking with his family, and a big dog, I'm not sure what breed it was, that came up behind him. He probably would have licked him all over as far as the kid was concerned, but it just gave him a big fright that here was a dog larger than himself right beside him. So there is concern about dogs running around off lead and the potential hazard that they can cause. Therefore, if it is to be continued to be allowed, I believe there should be a well-fenced area, such as John has suggested, should have spring-loaded gates so that once a dog is in there, it can't bounce on the gate and let himself back out again. And if people wanted to take the risk and walk in amongst those dogs, they could. But they would be well aware that there were dogs off lead and the potential damage they could cause. There was a comment in the sale and purchase agreement when council bought that land from me, but Val is going to deal with that. I'll leave that over to her. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll clarify the dog attack thing there. That was in 2019, and the woman was, or I think it was, woman was running, and a dog came up behind her and knocked her flying and attacked her leg. So that was her leg that you were looking at. Another one, 2003, that was, the dog got attacked and got 2 puncture wounds and a chunk in its neck and a chunk missing from its ear, and the owners of the attacking dog had to grab the own dog by the scruff of the neck and tow it away, but then didn't even give a comment on the person who was or the dog that was attacked. I brought this along, which I mentioned in my thing. This is 1993, and this is the proposal for that park. It was one of they were deciding whether they were going to do it in which of the little parks around the area was going to be the big one, and that was the highlight. Was this particular one to be a second esplanade for Palmerston North, a future vision for open space planning for Kelvin Grove. This was before it was bought from Ross, and all sorts of things were being developed. And I remember going to a thing in about 2001, and I've got a photo with Ross in it, so I know he was definitely there. I remember them talking about having an area for dogs, that would be like this off-leash, but I don't recall anything about the entire park being an off-lead park. And, we've got the flying fox and the various other things up there, and the proposals in this book were talking about having it where people get married and have their nice little cosy little thing. You imagine doing that nowadays, and you've got all these dogs potentially going to gallop through the middle of it. You've got no control. We've had a couple of fun days up there, but there's been nothing in a while, partly because of COVID, etc. But when you've got a place like this, and you've got the planning all being done for it, and all the ideas that everybody had for it, and having dogs everywhere is just, not quite what anybody had in mind. But passive leisure was the thing. People were up there planting trees. Used to have little groups go up there and organise planting of trees and stuff. And you've got all these things, and you can't really, you've got all these other people too scared to go there and take their own dogs, because they are potentially going to be attacked by somebody else's dog. And you hear it all the time. And these things here, admittedly our Kelvin Grove page sometimes feels like it's the cat and dog thing for Palmerston North, because everybody's dogs are running around and cats are going and stealing shoes. Yeah. But it's really important that we have you know, the places where the dogs can go out and be socialised, I can understand that. I think it's a good having them on leash in much of that park where they are controlled, but I don't think the whole park should be taken up with dogs running loose and people having no interest in, you know, whatever else, you know, just control is good. Anyway, that could be near enough and I'll get controlled by this, well, everything I forgot to say, so don't worry about that.
We've got to let them have a chance to ask us some questions, don't we? Yeah.
Well, actually, time has been exhausted. 10 minutes has expired. And thank you very much for coming to present your submission and speak to it. And you made some very key points for consideration, particularly around Linklater Park. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I thought we'd run out of time. If we
Yeah,
could, 'cause it's
I'm going to do
10
the minutes first.
Yeah.
Just for members, our final two submitters have advised us that they won't be coming in now. So that concludes that item, and what I intend to do is just take the minutes, to adopt the minutes before we break for morning tea. And so I'll move the minutes, seconded by Councillor Naylor. Open it up if there's any discussion or matters arising from the minutes. I'll invite a vote that the minutes of the Strategy and Finance Committee meeting on the 15th of November 23, Part 1, public, be confirmed as true and correct record. Invite the vote. That is passed unanimously, 12 votes for, none against. Members will now break till 1:45, and that would, we'll reconvene for the balance of business. Thank you. Okay, we'll move us on to item 9, which is the quarterly performance and financial report, period ending 31st of December. I'd like to welcome Scott Manser, Finance Manager, John Atkins, Project Management Office, and Andrew Boyle, Head of Community Planning, to come and present this report. Okay.
Good morning, councillors. So I will take this report largely as read. However, there are a couple of points that I just want to talk to first. So the result is 600,000 unfavourable at the end of December. As you can tell by the financial summary on page 33, there are some cost pressures that are beginning to surface, particularly in the transport space with regards to contracted services. A lot of it is timing of works at the moment and just when we've got the budget phased. We've actually had a really good run rate through the second quarter. Revenue currently remains unfavourable in the fees and charges space. However, that is offset by favourable costs in the same part of the business. So there are a few ups and downs across the place, but largely everything offsets with each other. Secondly, the capital program is progressing well, especially in comparison to previous financial years. There still remains a large amount of work to do in the second 6 months, but I'll pass over to John in a second to talk a little bit more about the capital program. Finally, just this week, council officers have begun a forecasting exercise to inform where we're going to land at 30th of June. This information will be going through ELT next month, and we'll be looking to make any decisions based off that and where officers' best estimate of the completion of the financial year is going to be. So I'll pass over to John, but we'll do a little quick introduction first. So John's joined the team as the Manager of Project Management Office in December, but it's his first time presenting to the Chamber today, and I would have got Chris to speak to it, but with him online. So without further ado, John, Manager of Project Management Office.
Tēnā tātou katoa I te rangatira. Thank you, Scott. I'm John Aiken. The capital delivery report, as read, shows at the moment there's a lot of delivery happening now in the summer months while we have longer daylight hours and better weather in particular for road construction. So key projects along the lines of the Featherston Street Cycleway, the reseal of Summerhill, and the bus stop construction is all well underway, and that should see an increase in capital spend throughout the next few months. Other notable projects in particular are the continuation of the earthquake strengthening of the crematorium, as well as the Arena 3 roof and the animal shelter, which are all progressing well. So work is well underway for these projects in particular, and expect the spend to continue as it is. Thank you.
And finally, just pass over to Andrew for any commentary around the key performance indicators.
Nothing specific to add from me, councillors. Thank you.
Happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you. Councillor Johnson, you're on the queue for this item? Yep, the floor's yours.
Well, thank you. I've only really got one question, and I think you did kind of touch on it, Scott, which is, are you in a position to say whether the net operating position will revert to a positive by the end of the financial year, or is that part of the forecasting that you were talking about?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're hoping to get from that exercise. So officers right across the business are this week and next week feeding into that. Then we'll start to do a review, firstly through finance, and then following up any questions and queries that the numbers show, and then finally through ELT. So we're hopeful and planning on having that as nil or positive at year end is the intent at this point.
So would we expect that to be reported in the next quarterly financial report?
Yeah, we'll provide some brief commentary on that and probably a bit of a talking point at the next quarter report in early May.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I did have one other question, sorry, and that was around the resourcing. So I see that the staff resourcing was just a blank page, basically. Is there anything you can add to that verbally now, given that this was probably written sometime before today?
I might pass that one over to our Chief People and Performance Officer regarding an update on that.
Kia ora, Danelle Whakatahi, Chief People and Performance Officer. At the moment, we're still going through all of our staffing numbers. We're at the moment recording everything in spreadsheets because we still don't have an HRA system. So we want to make sure that the data is really accurate. So I'm not happy to present data that I'm not confident.
Okay, I understand that. So would you be able to give us maybe an overview of trends or a reflection on vacancies, something like that?
Absolutely. At the moment, in the last quarter, we filled 56 vacancies in that quarter, which was a fantastic achievement by the team. We aren't having any issues recruiting people into roles. The team is doing a really good job in that space. And our attrition levels are continuing to trend downwards.
That's great. Thank you very much. Kira.
Thank you. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Just a couple of questions from me. Just want to ask firstly around Appendix 7, which starts on page 76. I see there's mention a number of times of the revised budget. I'd just like to get some clarification around exactly who decides on the revised budget and at what point elected members approve or feed into that budget.
So there's two approvals to the revised budget. So firstly, you'll set your annual budget in June each year, so that's the starting point. The first change to revised budgets is the carry forwards that council approved. I believe that was September last year. So that's the first one. And then any further changes are either done around the table in the chamber here or through the CE's delegation. And those are reported through Appendix 8, which shows all the different changes from the starting budget and anything that's moved and why that has moved and comes through the reports as the revised budget.
Thank you for that. And so I see on page 76 there's an increase to the professional service costs of 7.7 million. Perhaps I've missed something in Appendix 8, but I don't recall that being all the changes authorised being around professional services costs. So I was just wondering if you could perhaps give an explanation of where that additional 66% increase has been requested by council. This is on page 76 or 12 of the documents.
I would have to go and check why that one has moved like that. I can't see it off the top of my head, unfortunately. It does appear, knowing that we had the system change and the chart of accounts being mapped through to the new chart of accounts, there is a chance that in the first budget they weren't quite mapped correctly. So we've fixed it in the revised budget in regards to the correct mapping, but I will check back with the team and get an answer through to you for that.
Appreciate it. Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Zebulon.
I'm here, Mr Chair. Thank you. I'm just on page 58 and 59 and looking at the performance measures and the comments there. I had some additional questions on page 58 under environmental sustainability, measure 1, increase in sustainable practices. And the narrative there talks about supporting the Future Living Skills program. Can we get some more information as to how many of those courses we're running, what the impacts or outcomes of those courses are, what the attendance is, or something to help differentiate from the previous quarterly report?
We can't provide that information right now, but we can get it for the next report for sure.
Thank you, that would be great. And just on the one underneath that, talking about the 2 hectares that have been planted into native trees, is that the same 2 hectares as the previous quarterly report, or is this an additional 2 hectares of the total 14 that was going to be planted? Do we know how we're tracking against the 14?
I think that is something, again, that we would need to clarify in the next report. That is this the previous quarter or the whole year? Yeah. If that's all right with you, we can do it next report.
That would be great.
Yep,
Thank
okay.
you. Also, in the past, with these with this narrative, we've said that we regularly meet with E&M, but we also have been meeting with the Zero Waste Action Group and the Plastic Pollution Challenge. Are we still meeting with those groups, or is that coming under the E&M umbrella now? It appears to sort of a reduction in scope. I'm wondering if that's accurate.
Bryce Hosking, Group Manager for Property and Resource Recovery. We are continuing to meet regularly with Environment Network Manawatu, who are active players in the Zero Waste Action Group. The Zero Waste Action Group has essentially been on hold for a period. As we sort of assessed or reassessed the outcomes we were trying to achieve and whether and how much value that group was adding in a real sense. We've been working through the structure with E&M and getting close to hopefully being able to kick that back off again. But yeah, it was more around resourcing and how much action it was actually getting from it.
Right. Thank you. And just one last one, which was over the page on page 59, and measure 2 under resource recovery, and just looking there at some of the things that we've been or the initiatives that we've been working on there. Have we had initiatives come out of the Resource Recovery Fund? Have we been doing tours of the MRF? Is there, in terms of differentiating progress from the past report, I'm wondering, is there any specifics that we can profile?
Perhaps a number of, so at the beginning of the financial year, that's when we consider all of the submissions to access that fund. It'd be fair to say it's that the demand for initiatives is much higher than probably the available funds to actually fund them. Most of those initiatives are relatively ongoing and sort of span most of the year, as opposed to a sort of one-off action in August. So it is probably, it'd be fair to say most of those are still ongoing, but we can probably provide a bit more information to you.
Thank you very much. That's all from me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Naylor.
Thanks for the reports. Now, I've got a few questions which are on page 78, in the statement of cash flows. Now, there's a few variations there. The first one, I was wondering about the capital subsidies and grants, which is quite a bit less, about 7 million less. Is that because of the Waka Kotahi funding that we're not getting?
Yes, it'll be a combination of a few things. There are better off funding grants in the current year as well, and depending on the timing of when we planned that work versus when it's actually happening will affect the cash coming in. Also, because it's cash, if the government agencies haven't paid us, then we can't recognise it on here, so it may appear slightly different to the financial statements. But it is the timing of works, largely, of when we're expected the money to come in versus it actually arriving in bank accounts.
Okay, thank you. And so how are we treating programs that had associated funding from Waka Kotahi, for example? If that funding has got a question mark around it, are we assuming that program is still proceeding, or are those programs on hold?
At the 31st of December, we still, at that point, we hadn't received any official advice that funding had been removed entirely. So we have left that in the program at this point. However, we alluded to the fact that our initial advice is that the program may be removed. My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong here, John, we're still awaiting that confirmation around that. And when that happens, I suspect we'll need to do some budget changes through the third quarter report to remove that funding and the associated capital out of the financials.
Okay, so whilst we're waiting for that confirmation, are those programs proceeding or are they on hold?
Those programs are on hold.
Okay, thank you. So the 18.5 revised budget there, that we've only received 2.7 in the first 6 months, will you'll come back? Are you expecting that 18.5 to reduce, or is that subject to waiting for that further advice?
Yeah, we need official confirmation that that funding will be removed, and then we'll also actually get council to pass a resolution to remove it from the budget. And once that's done, that number will reduce. Yes.
Okay, thank you. The next one I was going to ask about is payment to suppliers and employees, which is revised budget was 62 million and it was 67.5, so it's 5.5 million extra. What's the main thing that's driven that additional requirement?
That's a whole combination of things. That's physical cash going out the door. In the run up to the end of the financial year, there was a lot of work completed but not physically paid for. So a lot of it will be that. There were accruals at year end to recognise the work done. There was a really large payment to our ERP supplier at the start of this financial year as the system came online in line with the milestones. So there's a whole raft of reasons that could be trending slightly higher at the moment.
Okay, thank you. And just the last one on that page is the net borrowings, and thanks for the answers already provided via email, but the debt brought down the 48.6 million, which is obviously quite a lot higher than the 11 that was in our budget. And I can see that that's offset by that 21.8, but even saying the 27, it being even net 27 million, just trying to get some understanding of why we're so far ahead with our need to draw down debt, given that our capital program is sort of at the 28% sort of stage.
Yeah, so it depends on what part of the capital program is ahead or behind. So as we know, we're behind on the capital subsidies. That means some of the debt-funded work may have been occurring earlier than the externally funded. Additionally, just prior to Christmas, we actually pre-borrowed some funding to ensure that we had enough funds over that Christmas New Year period. So that's a factor. But yeah, depending on which part of the capital program, because the cash flow budget is as a whole program, and as soon as we start chunking the year up into quarters, we can get some timing of actual cash flows of when things are coming in and out, and etc. Does that answer that question?
Kind of. I mean, some of this will probably flow on to the next paper as well, but I guess my other question around that is, so aside from the approved debt-funded operational project programs like the ERP, are we borrowing for operational costs?
Not at this point. However, as part of the forecasting exercise, we'll go and make sure that we do have enough funds operationally as well. And we also need to ensure that we're getting cash coming into the business to cover those sorts of costs as well. So that's all part of this forecasting work that's ongoing at the moment. Yeah.
So when cash flow at the end of the that 6-month period was 9.8 million, so that was required to pay for capital programs bills in January, not operational. Is that correct?
So a large chunk of that actually was the pre-borrowing. So that's an increase of 8.1 in the cash flow to that point of the year, and a large chunk of that was the pre-borrowing that we did to help with the capital program in that quarter. Yep.
Okay, thank you. And just I had a couple more questions on page 80, which is the capital changes authorised by council. The 2.8 carry forwards are that's approved in September. So is that not included in the amounts that are requested to council for needing debt? When we approve the amount of debt, are the carry forwards not factored into that amount?
No, they're not.
Okay. And the rest of those capital programs that have been authorised by council, do any of them have co-funding?
Yes, the co-funding is shown on the previous page. So because that particular page is the capital expenditure, the previous page shows the operating expenditure, which includes the capital revenue. So you can see program 1535 as the example has 100,000 of revenue and 100,000 of the expenditure. So we show both sides there.
Okay, thanks. I think that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go to a question online from
just around the miscellaneous revenue, the wind farm royalties. So that's obviously started. Where does that go? Because I understood that was sort of tagged to reserves or work of that nature.
Yes, that revenue lies within the parks activity and is recognised in that activity and is used for the betterment of parks around the city.
Right, okay. And the biogas generator, that's been repaired, it's back online, and that's giving us a offset in costs, is that right?
Yes, that's my understanding, and the variance that brought around has remained stable through this quarter as well.
Okay. And then just on page 36 there, and you may have said this earlier, so forgive me if I didn't hear it. The new animal shelter, ongoing construction, when is that due for completion?
Bryce Hosking, Group Manager, Property and Resource Recovery. It'll be finished in March, and then we'll be looking to do a official opening in April this year, 2024.
Right, okay, thank you. And just on that same page, I mean, where you've given us the details there around our capital program, new growth and renewals, and it's behind, but is that timing issues? Is it because we've had, you know, Christmas slow down and everything gets in the way?
In part, yes, there are timing issues there, but there have also been some delays with delivery of design, which have affected procurement and construction for some. Notwithstanding, there's still float or contingency within the schedule to deliver.
So that when you say, is that the panel people being a bit slow with getting stuff back to us?
Not just the design panel. We employ a variety of other design consultants to do work, depending on the nature of the work that it is. But in general, yes. Right. And just a general question here around the new information system, and I gather we're 6 months on, but I understand there's still some smaller teething problems. Do we have confidence the supplier is going to fix those, and there'll be no costs to council?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I might take that one. We are engaging actively with the supplier on all the issues that we've identified as part of implementing the software. You do tend to expect issues from changing from one system to a new system because processes change, but there are some issues that we want them specifically to help us with, and they are engaging with us.
Okay, and just my final question, probably to you, Andrew, around the performance measures and our colour coding system there. Are they sort of self-coded, i.e. the officers in charge of that particular piece of work give themselves a pass mark if they? But is that how it works?
In the first instance, it is scored or sort of coloured by the officer, but then it's reviewed by us and ELT.
Okay, all right. So how come we've given ourselves pass marks for, and we have done some good work in building services, but in the resource consenting, and it's been brought up at councillor only and with other councillors that we've been very slow in that space, yet we've gone to a green. Are the officers aware that there are issues?
So the resource consent, which is on page 44 of the report, is in red. The building consent is in green.
Now, page 45 is around, oh sorry, that's urban design, that's given a green tick as well. That's another story. Sorry, on page 43, you've given yourself a green tick from a red.
In terms of the land being zoned?
Yes.
Yep.
Yep. So you believe we're fine in that space as well?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right. I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it to comments. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for the report. I just got a quick tidy-up question, really, because Councillor Naylor asked a question earlier on. The citywide urban cycle infrastructure network improvements you talked about in general terms before, so that is now officially on hold? Is that my understanding?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So in terms of, do we have any indicative timeline from government in terms of when they're actually likely to provide a definitive answer on that for us?
We're still awaiting the government policy statement to inform that. Once we have the government policy statement, that will confirm funding or not for the transport choices.
So has council done any follow-up with the Minister's office in terms of whether or not we can actually get some clear understanding of where we're going on that?
That information's been requested of NZTA Waka Kotahi, yes. No response has been given back yet from the agency.
Thank you, Mr Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Naylor.
Thanks. Sorry, I just had one other question that I forgot to ask before, and that's around the way that we measure the capital programs that we deliver. When a program is complete, and how would we can see in one of the attachments each individual program how much it's been delivered for. Sometimes that's a bit over, sometimes that's a bit under what's been budgeted. Do we have anywhere that compares our overall capital delivery that we've delivered against the budgeted amounts for those programs that we've delivered?
Yes, through that exact schedule. What I will just clarify though is those pie charts are projects, not programs, and some programs can have multiple projects sort of within that. So one project may be complete in there, but there still could be others ongoing within the program. So you won't actually see, potentially you may not see a program finished until much closer to the end of the year as more projects get completed. The project budgets are allocated across and within the programs. So if there's some savings in one project, they're often moved across to enable full program delivery with all the projects in there. Does that help?
Yeah, I'm not so much concerned about the number of programs. Really, where I'm trying to identify, in the past we've had some colour coding for programs where you can see whether it's been over budget or under budget. I'm just trying to figure out with our current reporting. So at the moment, do we measure the delivery of our capital program about just basically by the amount we've spent? Or is there any way that, like say for example, more, on average we were over, spending more for the delivery of those capital programs? What would alert us to that through the current reporting?
That will be as part of the picture of the forecast. At December, it is generally too early to tell, and the reason being, as John alluded to, it's right bang smack in the middle of construction season. So we often see where the timing arises at the December quarter is resolved by the end of the March quarter as we get the final weather through January, February, March. And the forecasting exercise that officers are doing right now will allude to any of those changes, or if there is any need to request extra funding or move budgets around. Okay, so by the year end, is that a comparison that we make? If we say we've delivered $48.5 million worth of programs, say, do we say how much that $48.5 million should have cost us based on what we budgeted, or not? We do compare to the annual budget, and we also do compare to the revised budget as well. But the revisions of budget are either a result of a carry forward, or we've come across an issue that requires more funding, something that was unexpected, clay under the road or something like that needs additional funding. So that takes into account all of those things. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions myself, if that's okay. On the page 73, under roading, going 2/3 down at 167 James Line improvements, can I understand why the actual close to twice as much for that proposed stretch of road?
Bryce Hosking, Group Manager, Acting Group Manager, Transport and Development. So majority of the James Line work was completed on time, and it was completed within budget. However, one unforeseen result of that work is it actually started to divert a lot more heavy vehicles down James Line, which were otherwise taking other routes now that the road was wider and a bit more friendly to drive down. And the result of that was it meant that intersection on Kelvin Grove Road, where it intersects with James Line, the treatment that we'd applied simply wasn't standing up to that increase in vehicles, so we had to go back and redo that section with a much more enduring solution, hence the extra costs. Importantly, we were able to reprioritise some funds through our rehab program to actually offset that. Hence, there was no report needing to come asking for any extra funds.
Okay. Thank you. Then on page 44, it talks about the consents and the timeframes around processing those, and with an indication of actually proposing in the long-term plan to push that out to an 80% target. But can I understand why the statutory timeframes are noted? Can I understand how many working days are we extending beyond that to process the consents? Because I think what this masks is how long it actually does take to process consents.
Unfortunately, I can't give you the specifics of what sort of the average time is going beyond the statutory timeframes, but I can certainly find that out for you and provide it. I would say that resource consents are becoming more complex and more difficult. Well, the feedback from the manager in the planning space is that they're becoming more difficult and complex to process, so that is contributing to some of those delays.
Okay, when we do the consideration of altering the target, I wondered if there might be some thought around the average extended working days beyond the statutory timeframe and have that as a benchmark to actually measure how long it's actually taking to process rather than just a single target.
Sure, we can certainly take that on board and consider that.
Thank you. They're my questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just back to Kerry Lee, just with one of her replies there. So, Kerry Lee, why are consents becoming so difficult? Is it our district plan? Is it rules that are being forced upon us from legislative, regional council, government? Why is it so hard?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would say that there's probably a range of reasons that make the process difficult. In part, it's the complexity of the developments, as I mentioned before. In part, it's the fact that as compared to building, where the guidelines are national and understood by our developers throughout the country, district plans, as you know, are very specific to an area, and so therefore there's very specific requirements that mean that our customers are perhaps not as comfortable perhaps or with the requirements of the district plan as they may be in terms of the building guidelines, but also there are some challenges within the district plan which perhaps my colleague David Murphy might be better to talk to.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, David Murphy, Chief Planning Officer. Certainly one of the things that we've continually heard feedback from the development community about in relation to the district plan has been the difficulty around intensification, medium density development, infill sort of intensification, which is becoming increasingly important in terms of how we grow the city, in terms of we know the challenges around greenfield development and the cost of those that will continue to obviously be an option for us. The plan change that is 95% prepared, which will be coming to council this year, before the middle of the year, we're waiting on the final stormwater assessment at the moment, is proposing to substantially simplify the process for intensification and infill development. So a lot of the assessment criteria around urban design will be simplified. There will be a permitted activity standard for medium density development. That means resource consent will not even be required if you meet certain standards. So that's plan change I, the medium density development. So you'll recall the metro cities went through a process where they had to put in place mandatory requirements for three dwellings up to 3 stories on each site. Because we're a medium growth, we had to develop some specific provisions for that. So those are 95% done. hopeful that those will, as I said, alleviate a lot of the feedback and concerns that we're getting at the moment around that particular form of development.
Could I just thanks David, and thank you Kerry Lee. I mean, that's answered the majority of the stuff. So are we talking to the very sector that we serve to inform some of those, especially the urban design covenants, all the problems that we seem to be getting?
Yes, so the Build Palmy, actually I was having a conversation with the team about that just this morning. Actually, the Build Palmy emails that have gone out have provided information about Plan Change I and how to engage in that. We've had various open days, so there's been certainly the opportunity's been made available for input from a wide range of sectors, from the surveyors, architects to developers. So there's been, obviously it's an interest that the community holds dearly as well, because you know, making medium density and infill development permitted, some people are also concerned about what that means to their neighbourhoods and the amenity and outlook and backyards and light and all those sorts of things. So there's a range of factors to consider.
And just finally, it's just not the density stuff. Is it a bit more wide ranging than that as well? I mean, it's just general development stuff.
So it's focused on streamlining the planning rules for urban intensification, so infill and medium density development.
So it doesn't address anything else.
Well, that's a substantial. When you say it doesn't address anything else, it will affect the entire residential zone of the city, which is a significant part of the urban area. So it's a significant plan change.
Okay, I'll leave it to comment. Thanks.
Thanks, you. I might just have one further question along the line, just understanding a perspective on a nationwide around our other metro cities, how they have measures around consenting timeframes. Is there any knowledge or any comment you could add around where we sit across the country as far as our performance and consenting timeframes?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can't offer anything at this stage.
Okay, thank you. Final question, Councillor Wood.
Sorry to jump in, Mr. Chair. Just a question that's occurred to me in light of David's answer. I was just wondering, in the statistics that you were going to collect and report to Councillor Kerry Lee, if you could give us the proportion of the 28% of resource consents that aren't being processed on time, what proportion of those are infill and medium density, so we can understand what's going to be fixed or potentially fixed by the Plan Change I, and then what other issues we're facing that will need to be solved through other measures. Would that be possible? Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, officers. That concludes questions. As far as advancing debate on this issue or comment, I'll move the recommendations before us that the committee receive the memorandum titled Quarterly Performance and Financial Report, period ending 31st December 23, and related attachments, presented on the 21st of February 24, seconded by Councillor Naylor. Open it up for any comments or debate. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, and thank you to staff once again for a comprehensive report. It does give us really valuable information. I do feel a little bit uneasy with the overall picture of where we're at, and you know, have had a lot of questions answered, and that's been helpful. I do think it's going to be really important to get that forecasting, and I'm pleased to hear that that work is underway, to get a bit more of an idea about how we're going to look in that second half of the year. I guess just to clarify my concerns, you know, as is outlined on page 36, that overall debt profile, we do have a big capital program in terms of capital new and growth that does need to be debt funded, and it seems that we've, you know, drawn down about 3/4 of the debt that we made available for that, whilst at the same time have delivered about 28% of that program. So looking forward to that second 6 months, it appears that we have another 53.7 million of capital new and growth to complete, but with less than 10 million debt capacity available. And that does concern me a little bit. And the answers to some of those questions around the timing does explain some of that. Probably doesn't give me full confidence of feeling that our full program is able to be paid for within the capacity that we've provided for to date. And I recognise the next paper does speak to that a little bit, so there'll be some further discussion, but I just did want to make comment on that. I think it's something that we're going to have to really think about, particularly as we have requests for unbudgeted capital coming to the table. I do think we have to have a really good understanding of where we're up to in our current financial year in terms of our approved capital program and how we're funding that and how far we're through on the delivery. But, you know, aside from that, it'll be good to get that January month-end update shortly, and I look forward to perhaps further information around that forecast that will come at some point.
Thank you. Mr Mayor.
Oh, thanks, Mr Chair. Look, I just want to thank the officers for another update. Not quite sharing Councillor Naylor's concerns. I mean, having read budgets and business plans for years, I mean, sometimes this is a timing issue, and I think some of those were teased out in questions. And look, we get a lot of reporting here, and it's whether you trust the officers, whether you trust the contractors doing the work, and do we? Well, I do, certainly. And also, we are ahead. The capital program has been well signalled about what we're trying to do, and we're actually, in timing-wise, we're actually better off than we have been in previous years. So I have some confidence that the officers have signalled that we won't get entirely 100%. 5%'s already been signalled that because of various reasons it won't be delivered. But if we can get to that 90-95%, I think well done to the officers. One thing I just do want to signal, and I thank the officers for some of their questions, and I think we can be doing more in this space, is around city growth, the resource consenting, and the urban design aspects. They're going to come home, and it will affect our delivery on things too if we don't get some of these things right. I disagree a little bit that the settings are right at the moment. They're not. Otherwise, I wouldn't be fielding the amount of complaints. The CE wouldn't be fielding the amount of complaints we're getting at the moment around some of the resource consenting aspects. I do think we can do some more in that space, and I don't think it's all to do with medium density either. I think it's some of the permissive aspects of our district plan. That's why our neighbours are reaping the rewards of big development. In Manawatu, Tararua, Wanganui, Levin, it's much easier to develop. I look, a bouquet to the building services team. They're delivering really well at 94%, but it's the resource consenting, and I know it's difficult work. I know it's not just straightforward, but to lower our standards to maybe 80% of getting it right, I think that's terrible. It actually isn't. It shouldn't. I mean, to even put that in writing, I think really you do need to look at what the team's doing. So have we got the district plan right? Does it need more than just a tweak in Plan I? I'm going to put it out there and say it does. And people are voting with their feet. They're not developing. That's why anybody go and try and get a section in town. It is damn well difficult. Talk to the major builders about infilling. It's really hard work. So let's get on top of that. Urban design balance, we need it. But at the moment, I think it overtakes some of our work, and it certainly has the say on whether a consent goes through or not. And I'd have to say, in other councils, that's not the case, and even in other city councils, that's not the case. So, all in all, thank you to the officers. Financially, looking good, but I do think there is some work to do around our development and district plan into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to comment now that along the similar lines that area, rather than reducing our target so we look like we're performing better, is actually putting in resources or putting in the attention where we will get faster consenting processes achieved. When we look forward in the long-term plan, the amount of investment and the cost of our future is actually quite significant, and so the growth component to our population is very important. And if we're going to be holding up roadblocks because of the consenting process for our development, whether it is medium density or if it's just general consenting, we need to put some key attention to that so we can get the investment and the construction and the development happening, not only because of that sector is so important to our city, but it's also the resident base that we need to grow to actually get homes finished and get people residing in our city to help invest into our future. So I just see that as so critical, and I think just having those questions around that item is very important. And when we come to reviewing our performance in that area through the long-term plan, I think these comments will be important for our consideration. We have one last comment or speaker, and that is online, Councillor Harpeta.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to echo the words that you have said and the Mayor said, that I do think that we need to review our district plan, and if we need to put a motion up, and I'm not sure whether we have to look to the Chief Planning Officer to put a motion up, whether he needs that, or to when the district plan is coming up for review. But we do need to look at that, because I think that our district plan at the moment is too restrictive. So, Mr. Chair, I don't know whether you need to move a motion to do that or whether or not we don't.
Perhaps I might get you to pause, and we'll have, this item is actually looking back, and so I think the item, for what you're proposing is not wrong, but probably doesn't fit with this item in its pureness. Can I work with you in regards to putting something forward into the work schedule for something along that lines for future?
Yeah,
Is that
just
okay?
finishing my comment. Yeah, finishing my comments. I just think that for growth going forward, we have to do something, because I'm hearing the same things as well from these developers. And my other comment is just related to licensing. I have been hearing it not from myself, I'm putting that aside, it's from other licensees are saying the same thing about the slowness of the process. So looking forward to that report coming forward out of that area. And it's more around, I'm really worried that we haven't got enough staff in that area. So looking forward to that report coming out from Kerry Lee to tell us what they need in that area so we can actually smarten up that process. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that.
Thank you. That concludes comments and debate on this item. I'll now invite a vote on the recommendation before us. That is passed unanimously, 11 votes for. Thank you. Without putting pressure on us, councillors, I'd like to have set some sort of objective maybe that we can get through the balance of this order paper before we do break for lunch, or break for the day would be my desire. But that brings us to item 10, which is our Treasury Report quarter ending 31st of December 23. And thank you, Steve. Invite you as the Strategy Manager of Finance to present. Thank you.
Good morning, councillors. This is a relatively routine report normally, and so I just take the balance of it as being read, but there are a couple of things that I'd like to just draw your attention to. The first is I make a comment about the council's credit rating, and I just would like to advise that a couple of days ago, Standard & Poor's issued a statement about councils and their credit ratings, and that statement is basically saying, reinforces something that they said in a paper a few months ago, and that was that, as we'll all be aware, councils around the country are facing increased challenges in terms of funding their infrastructure. And so that's meaning that I guess Standard & Poor's are looking more closely at those, and whilst they haven't changed the credit rating of councils, they have given a little flag by calling them a negative watch, if you like, in terms of that's their terminology. And so in our case, we're like other councils in our same rating, where they, instead of it being described as being stable, it's now got a description of being negative, which means that they are watching it a bit more closely, I guess. it won't make any difference in reality to us at the moment in terms of where we're at, because our rating is unchanged. But we are, or will be, subject to the next annual review within the next few weeks, so they're coming to visit us to work through that. The second thing I'd just like to mention, and it was partly covered in the previous item, was this recommendation that I've made here to increase the delegation that we have to raise funds for the remainder of the year. As was elicited in the questions in the previous item, the sum that we ask for in June is based on what the annual budget that's approved says is going to be the increase in the debt requirement based on the budget. The sum that we need in cash at any particular time is dependent on a number of things. The council doesn't have reserves, cash reserves or anything like that, so we are looking at the daily cash flows. That's part of what we do. And so if things move around or we don't get paid for something, or we incur expenditure that is earlier than what we thought, then obviously we need to be aware and have funds to be able to cope with that. So that's part of what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. And of course we don't want to be caught out ever by not having the funds available. And so part of that is addressed through having credit lines with banks, but as well we need at times to be able to draw longer term funds, especially in the environment that we are, where we've got an increasing debt profile over the next few years. As was drawn out through the questions in the previous item and mentioned on page 80 in the report, Council's approved a number of changes to the budgets since the original draft, and there have been more since then as well, as recently as last week, where you've approved some other significant sums that will be funded from debt. So they broadly add up to around about 10 million or so, rounded. And so this recommendation here is just to make sure that we've got sufficient delegation to raise the funds that are required to meet the requirements of the council. And if, as I've mentioned in the past, if that proves for whatever reason to be inadequate, we'll come back again seeking further delegation. But for the moment, this should be roughly right to cope with the approvals that you've given so far. So that's why this recommendations here before you.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Open up for any questions. Councillor Naylor.
Thanks, Steve. I'm just wondering, the comment that you made at the beginning about Standard & Poor's giving us a negative rating and being the subject of a review, what's the reason for them to give us a negative rating at this point?
It's not so much termed a negative rating. The rating hasn't changed. They make a point in their publications to say that. It's just that the policy settings, and so their words are really in terms of New Zealand councils remain highly rated, they say, after as sort of part of their conclusion. And they've not lowered the ratings of any council, but they've flagged a potential weakening in ratings and revised outlooks to negative. It's offset. I guess they've always had a very strong belief in the legislative framework for the way in which we work. In world terms, New Zealand's got very good controls through the long-term planning process, the annual planning process, and then reporting process. And so that always means that we score highly, and there's no change to that really. But it's because of the signals that there've been from councils all through the country really about the pressure that's coming on to fund infrastructure. And so they've taken that into account in their assessments going forward. And as always, they will be looking in their next regular review to understand our approach and how we're going to go about funding the requirements that we have and our capacity to service those.
Thank you. So will there be some sort of report come to us once they've more fully for us to be able to understand that?
about this negative position.
Yes.
I wasn't planning that we did so. Really, it's from my perspective, it's pretty straightforward. Basically, it's just them signalling to the market, really, the state that we all know councils are funding at the moment, and not changing our rating, but just saying that there are certainly pressures there. When it comes to the next formal review of our rating, obviously will depend upon what that is and what they say as to how we go about reporting that one.
Thank you. Now, just the questions that I have related to this paper. Sorry, my computer's just gone dead. Can I borrow your papers? The 37 million that was already approved, debt capacity, when based on the approved annual budget, what was the assumption of delivery?
Oh, at the moment, that would have assumed 100% delivery, really.
100% delivery. Okay, so the comment I made in the previous paper around still having 53.7 million capital program, but only 9.5 million debt capacity left from what we've made available. Is there anything can you explain the gap? Like, were we expecting that much revenue, the difference?
Broadly, what we've spent to date for capital, as was outlined in some responses to you, is in line with the capital expenditure the net capital expenditure that we've had. So, but as Scott mentioned in part of his reply, I raised some money in December that would see us through December-January period. And so we had some cash, 8 million roughly, on hand at that point. So that's funding us through now, and we're just in the process of considering how much we need to borrow going forward for the remainder of the year. That's a moving feast at times, and it's quite difficult to project. It depends on the progress on lots of things, and particularly when new things are being approved from time to time. So, in theory, the budgets, as they're drawn up and as predicted, we should be able to live within the increased amount, the 47 million or so. But that's sort of always under review, and as part of our forecasting exercise, we're double checking for ourselves just our understanding of what else is driving, I suppose, the cash requirement. We do make assumptions, for example, about some of our activities where we may not have had the payments in yet for some of those things. So there are sometimes quite, 4 or 5 million for things that are floating around in the way in which we're operating for subdivisions or whatever it is that impact on what cash we've got on hand at any particular time. And so.
Okay, thank you. So on page 87 and under point 3.14, it's got there since 30th of June that 55 million of term debt has been raised. But then on the chart on page 85, it's got gross debt changes 50 million. I'm just wondering, am I misunderstanding something, or is one of them not correct?
The chart 50, hopefully they all tie up. We raised, on the chart in 3.3, we show that there was a total of new debt of 58 million raised during the year and some repaid. We say that of the 58 million, 3 million of that was for the airport. And then hopefully that other graph, the other chart then ties up with that as well.
Okay, so the 27.5 million shown in 3.5, that's correct, the net council-related debt.
Yes.
The change, 27.5. Yes. Okay, so the basis for the need for the additional 10 million is just the new unbudgeted capital programs that council has approved.
In broad terms, yes.
In broad terms. So is there any consideration if the 37 million that we originally approved was to deliver the full capital program, would there be any value in understanding our forecasting? Because obviously, as we heard in the previous paper, there's some programs that are on hold because of waiting, confirmation about co-funding, etc. And traditionally, we understand that we don't deliver all of it. Do we need to approve 10 million if the assumption of that is 100% delivery of the capital program?
My feeling is, yes, you do need to approve 10 million. We need that capacity. We can't have it that we can't raise the funds on the day we need them. But we don't raise funds unless they're required. So it's an enabling resolution as I said, we just don't go out to raise funds that we don't need.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all from me.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Zebulon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Steve. I'm on page 87, so I'm looking at 3.15 and that third bullet point there, talking about the debt forecast, and we're currently assuming that the debt will not exceed the LGFA's 280% cap. And I guess I'm wondering, does that infer that our forecasts might exceed the 250% cap that we are proposing with this LTP?
Well, I guess at the moment, we're in theory managing to the last LTP as updated by, because that's the formal decisions of the council about what the projected debt will be. But of course, we know that the projected debt can't be raised because the council doesn't have the capacity to do that. So what I've done in this particular report now, and in the last little while, we've been trying to say, what is a realistic sum that we should be trying to say is the maximum debt that we're using as the guide to say how much is fixed or floating. That's the predominant reason we're having to try and make that call. And it is something that we're reviewing every month just to say what's the most sensible thing to be doing here. And so for the moment, right this instant, we've just been using this as a sort of a maximum guide. But as the 10-year plan evolves, you're talking about having a limit of 250%, obviously. So we would build that into the model and have a scenario as well that that would be the maximum, and then look at the forecast debt requirements based on what capex there is and see how that related if you chop some off of it, assuming some didn't get done in the years which it was planned or whatever. But so we do have 2 or 3 different scenarios that we're looking at all the time to decide how best to manage this. But right for this instant, given that we're in the process of quite a bit of sort of evolution of where we're headed, we've decided that the market's not really in a state that it's a good time to be buying swaps right this instant, and so the policy would indicate we would sort of need to be doing so soon, but we've held off doing that and I guess tried to make more realistic the assumption about how much debt it is into the future that we're looking to take into the calculation for that longer set of what's appropriate for fixed and floating.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. There's no further questions. Appreciate you presenting this report. As Chair, I'm happy to move the 3 recommendations that are before us that are on paper. That the committee note the performance of Council Treasury activity for the quarter ending 31st of December. That Council note that at its meeting on the 14th of June 23, it authorised the Chief Executive to borrow up to 37 million of additional term debt to fund the approved 23-24 annual budget. And 3, that to reflect the subsequent resolutions approving additional expenditure, Council increased the authorisation to the Chief Executive to borrow up to 47 million of additional term debt by way of bank loans or credit facilities or other facilities, or the issue of stock for the borrowing secured by the debenture trust deed in accordance with the delegation authority. I'm happy to move that. Okay, I'll go with Councillor Hancock, all three, just for simplicity. Appreciate your view on that, Councillor Naylor. So Councillor Hancock seconded that. Open it up for comment and debate. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Just to explain my position, I will be very happy to support the first two recommendations. I do have a level of unease about the third recommendation. I acknowledge that the need for it is driven by the additional 10 million of capital program that has been approved by the majority of council. Much of those programs, as many of you are aware, I haven't supported, and I do have a level of unease about the level of debt that we are accruing as a result of the size of our capital program. Yes, those are majority decisions, and so yes, that does need to be funded. However, given the situation we're in, my preference would be that we have a better understanding of the forecast of what is actually required. There are some changes that are happening to our there are some changes, particularly as a result of some of the assumptions that were made around co-funding, that may affect whether or not some of our approved programs progress. I also have a view that if we do believe that there's $10 million worth of new programs that we need to do this year, that we should consider other programs in our approved budget to look at what can be deferred or reduced to help offset that, rather than simply increasing the debt by a further 10 million if that's required. As the officer outlined, it's there if it's required. Given that it's been confirmed by the officer that 37 million debt capacity assumes 100% delivery of the capital new program, my view is that is a very unlikely scenario. I don't think I've ever known a time that we've delivered 100% of our capital program. My preference would be for us to have a better understanding around the forecasting, and then for us to consider whether we want to add 10 million debt or whether there's adjustments that can be made to our existing capital new program. So for that reason, I won't be supporting 3. If for the unlikely event that it wasn't supported by the majority of the room, I'd be really happy to propose that we relook at it once we have better information around the forecasting, which is the work that the officers are currently doing.
Thank you. There's no further speakers. I am happy to take recommendation 3 separately to capture the votes as you wish, but without any other speaker. I was just going to say then, this is just a credit facility recommendation. It doesn't mean that we actually end up expending it if there's no need in our in the forecast, in the reality what's eventuated. So I'm very comfortable with recommendation 3 as an add-on. Mr. Mayor.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Chair, I jumped in a little bit late there. Look, I agree with you, and I think you nailed it. And these are enabling resolutions. If you understand how credit supply goes, this is a line of credit. It doesn't mean, it gives the officers tools to be able to do their job. If you don't vote for 3, you're basically making Steve tying his arm up around his back, and he can't enable to do, he won't be able to have the credit line there to do things. We may not draw it down, but we've got to give the officers some sort of, if you understand how that all goes. Look, I appreciate that not everybody's on the same page with this, but it goes through a pretty rigorous process of whether we're going to need this money. There's almost a daily look at what we need and what we're paying back, so it's not all one way. Just want to comment on the rating as well. And look, that negative outlook was put over basically local government New Zealand, and that's, many councils, 15, and including 3 of New Zealand's richest councils, New Plymouth and Greater Wellington, and all that have the same credit rating as the Crown, were put on a watch. So yes, Palmerston North's amongst that, and but we're there with where there were some pretty big councils too. So I think it's the pressure that all of New Zealand local government's going under, and the lack of revenue streams other than just rates and a little bit of fees and charges. So I think I hope the government's taking a look at it, because as the officers have said, we certainly still have a very strong AA plus rating, but we will, as all of local government, come under some pressure in the coming years. So that does need to be factored in. I think that's fairly and squarely sits with Cabinet and the government on what they can do to help all forms of government in New Zealand. So ask you to support this. It's pretty straightforward, to be fair. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes comment and debate. I'll now invite a vote on recommendations 1 and 2. That moves us on to item 11. I'd like to invite Scott Manser, our Finance Manager, to present the elected members' expenditure report for 22-23. Welcome.
Good afternoon again. So largely going to take this report as read as well. I do have a couple of points that I just want to mention. So this budget, like all other budgets for council, has completed the audit process at the end of the 22-23 financial year. There were no processes or concerns raised by the audit team around any approval of expenditure or any coding or anything like that. And secondly, overall, the budget for the mayoral activity has remained within budget. So I don't foresee any issues there. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Scott. There are a couple of questions. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Scott. Just wondered if you had any feel of how the expenses compare with other councils of similar size?
I haven't had a look at that.
Okay, thank you.
You, Councillor Naylor.
Thanks. Just a couple of things. The timing is a bit of a delay because this is to the end of June 23. Is there a reason why it takes this long to come to us, or?
No. All intents and purposes, I would have had this at the November Strategy and Finance Committee. I was slightly preoccupied with the budgets for the LTP, so I just missed doing this, unfortunately.
Understand that. Okay, thank you. And just the other question I had was page 99 around the discretionary fund budgets. The reporting, do we have any guidelines or policies that help guide the approval or the not approval of requests that come through for the mayoral discretionary fund and the relief fund?
So the mayoral discretionary fund and the relief fund are expenditure is approved by the mayor himself. The other budgets in table 2 are approved by others in that place, but as they're a discretionary fund, it's entirely up to the mayor himself as to what he chooses to spend those on.
Okay, and just the the recipients of those discretionary funds and relief fund, is that reported anywhere to elected members?
I'm not certain on the answer to that question. Do you know? I'm getting a shake from Cam, so not that I'm aware of.
Obviously, I presume there'd be some privacy issues. If that were to be reported to a part 2 part of the meeting, would that meet the requirements under the Local Government Act for privacy, or any of the reasons for exclusion from the public?
I'll pass that one to Cam.
through you, Mr. Chair. I'd have to consider that along with legal counsel, I suppose, but most definitely, at a minimum, it would need to be a Part 2 item to protect those who may be receiving funds through that scheme. Yeah, but I'm not sure exactly if there's anything else I'm not aware of as to why we couldn't or shouldn't at this point.
If elected members wanted that reported to Part 2, could we ask, could that happen, or would we need a resolution to that effect?
I would recommend that you would probably want to put that forward as a recommendation so that we can make sure that that's captured and acknowledged.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I'm happy to pop that through as a recommendation. Thanks.
So I asked you just to write that up just quickly. On that basis, basically you're asking for the discretionary mayoral relief fund budget to be presented in Part 2. Is there a seconder for that recommendation on that vein from Councillor Naylor? That's essentially as it's caught. Is there a seconder? That's going to lapse for lack of a seconder, Councillor Naylor, just at this time. There are no further speakers. We haven't already, there's no further questions, rather. Thank you, Scott. I'm going to move the recommendation before us that the committee receive the memorandum titled Elected Members Expenditure 22-23, presented to the Strategy and Finance Committee on the 21st of February 24. Seconder, I'll call for Councillor Hancock. Open it up for comments and debates. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. I'm fairly comfortable. I mean, this is a standard report. Just, I guess, to put some comments around my view, even though it's been not seconded, I will put my views on the table. I recognise there is discretionary funds available for the Mayor to distribute. I see that is a little bit over budget at the moment. My view about needing to be reported somewhere is that we have groups and individuals come to us through annual budget and annual plan process, and all the requests for funding through those processes go through quite a rigorous process of being debated, being considered. We don't have any line of sight currently about if there is any overlap with groups or individuals who are receiving money through the discretionary funds. It's a relatively small amount in the whole scheme of things, 16,500, but I think that we need to remember that all money that is spent is ratepayers' money. So currently, I do have a little bit of discomfort if there is ratepayers' money being spent in a way that has no oversight of elected members or any. There's not really any understanding as an elected member. I don't know who's getting money. There's no guideline or policy that guides that. So how much money is going to various groups or individuals in the community and for what, I'm not aware. I think it would be better for better transparency around that. So those are my reasons, but look, if there's no seconder, I'll leave that there, but I just did want to make that comment. I think all ratepayers' money, there should be some level of accountability and transparency around it, and guidelines to guide what that's spent on. But aside from that, happy to support this report.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Mayor.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Chair. Look, I wasn't going to comment, but it isn't actually all public money. Some of this money is derived from philanthropic sources, so that's not entirely true, the last comments. Look, previous officer holders have not been under this level of scrutiny, so there is quite a lot of transparency here. And there's a reason why it's called discretionary fund, and that's when individuals, mainly groups to be fair, come in, and they may be refugees, they may be sporting groups, they may be environmental groups that need either a hand to get something underway, and we're talking in the very small amounts to get things over the line for them. I would be loath to mention a whole lot of names publicly, even in part two. There's privacy issues, and I think I would be breaking confidence of groups, especially those that have seeked out some support. So I would not be in favour of that, and I strongly advise you that would be down a pretty slippery path legally, I think, too. I get the motion that people want to delve into it a bit more, and I'm quite happy to supply the information I can, or my office can, to you all in just a general memo note. All right, thank you.
Thank you. There's no further members wishing to speak, so I'll now put this recommendation before us. That is passed, 11 votes for and 1 abstention. That moves us on to item 12, and I'd like to encourage our senior policy analyst around the speed management plan process update. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We also have Stuart Cartwright here to provide additional advice or comments regarding any of the technical matters. So the purpose of today's report is to bring up to date on the new information about the speed limit process since last December, and outline the options available to you for proceeding with the 2 speed management plans that we've been working on. So just to be very clear, we've been working on 2 plans. The first one is the interim speed management plan, which deals with speed limits around schools. And the second one is the full speed management plan, which relates to a small number of speed limit changes that we were proposing on other roads, and including 2 high-risk intersections. So firstly, there have been no new announcements or releases of information about the changes to the speed limits rules since we received the letter from the Minister last December. So our advice that we gave in December last year stands, and we're not recommending that the Council reinitiate the deliberations on submissions to the interim SMP until we receive further information from the Government. There is an opportunity, however, for the committee to consider, which is covered in paragraph 4.4 of the report, given that there's little to no chance that the Council could restart the deliberations on the interim SMP and complete the speed limit process, and then go on to implement the changes using the funding available from Waka Kotahi before it expires in June this year. With 4 months left in this financial year, that's just not possible to achieve. So that means there's a total of $833,000 of funding that was set aside to implement the school speed limits changes. And this is comprised of 51% funding from Waka Kotahi with the remainder from Council. So in the report we've given consideration to whether there is another purpose that the funding could be applied that it would still be eligible for. And one such possibility we've investigated in a preliminary fashion is the installation of raised pedestrian platforms outside schools. Some initial indications from NCTA Waka Kotahi is that such a program could be consistent with the criteria that they have, but it would need to be evaluated in more detail before a decision could be made. So we've included this here as an option for you to consider. If you want us to go away and do further work on that, then you could move recommendation 1A, and we'll bring a report back to you with some more details. If you don't want us to explore that option, then recommendation 1B would be the recommendation to move. Turning to the full SMP, the chair of the committee made the decision in December to defer the hearing of submissions on the full SMP for the same reasons that we didn't have enough clarity from the government on changes to the speed limits rule. However, that was not a formal decision by the committee, so we've brought it as an opportunity for you here to make that formal decision as a committee. And if you wanted to do that and defer work on the full SMP, then we'd suggest you move recommendation 2B. However, it's worth noting that the council still does have the autonomy to proceed with setting speed limits via the current method. The changes that were made by Cabinet in December have only removed the deadlines and the statutory targets for speed limits around schools. We still have the ability to set speed limits using our current process and submit it for certification. So if the committee wants to resume the process for the full SMP, then you should be looking to move recommendation 2A, and that would set the date for hearings on the full SMP for 10 April. There's a third optional recommendation, which relates to the intersection speed zones. So as you'll recall, in the full SMP, we proposed 2 ISZs, intersection speed zones, which lower the speed limits on the main road at a high-risk rural intersection when there's traffic waiting on those side roads. They are legal speed limits as they are implemented, so we can't go ahead and put that infrastructure in without having a legal speed limit. However, one opportunity that we were exploring within the infrastructure unit is whether you could install that as an active warning sign. At the time of writing the report, we didn't have clear advice from Whakatahi about the legality of that. I received an email this morning which gave us some clearer advice, and the upshot is that without a legal speed limit backing that signage, it would not be recommended. There's another issue in that putting in the infrastructure while consultation has not yet been completed would be seen as predetermining the outcome of that consultation process. However, if you want to investigate treatment for those intersections, then there is a possibility for option 2C, and we would go away and produce some, get some further advice and produce some options for you to consider. So I think that covers everything I wanted to say. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take those or for Stuart to answer.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Peter. Just wondering what the cost of a raised platform is, because I understand there's been some debate over that recently.
Stuart Cartwright, Chief Engineer. Depending on the location, can range anywhere from $20,000 to $60,000.
22?
60,000.
60,000, okay. So in terms of the number of raised platforms that we could deliver from the funding, would we be able to use the whole of that 833,000 budget for raised platforms?
That's very doubtful. Probably get through maybe a third of that, but yeah, as Peter was alerting that we've only got a limited time before the end of the financial year.
Yeah, so it has to be done before end of June. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Can I just ask, with the budget, with the funding from Waka Kotahi, that is it dollar for dollar? So it's not like we can just use their 425,000. We'd need to match dollar for dollar. It's not like we can just do 425 worth of work.
Correct. So it's FAR funding, and Whakatahi contributes 51%. We contribute the balance, but we, I believe, we reclaim the money from Whakatahi once it's been expended.
Thank you. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one question regarding the intersection speed zone signs that you're proposing as a warning, or could be proposing as a warning. Are there similar signs anywhere else in the country, or would this be a Palmerston North special?
This is one of the things that's been quite hard to determine. The email I received this morning described a trial sign that has been trialled somewhere in the country, which identifies it as an intersection and has an illuminated part of the sign which says slow down. That's not necessarily an option at the moment, but could be an option if it was moved out of the trial state. The approach that we had been exploring, I think, has been confirmed by Whakatahi as not being valid without the speed limit behind it. So if we were to install the signage hardware and have it flash up either a 60 or a 70 km/h speed limit, police would not be able to legally enforce it. They could potentially instruct us to switch it off, or Whakatahi could instruct us to take it out. So that's the advice that's coming through from them at the moment.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have a lot of schools in the city without the standard 40k flashing signs. Could this money be used for that?
I think that's one of the reasons why the proposal, the decision made last year was to put it on hold, because we don't know what changes are coming through to the speed limits rule. At the moment, the rule still states that the speed limit is 30 k's for a variable speed limit outside schools, rather than the 40 k's that we currently have, which was set under an older rule. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty still around what we will be allowed to do, and that's why we haven't pushed forward with any alternatives at this stage.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Naylor.
Thanks. Just a couple of things to clarify. The comments you made about the legal opinion and that they said the signage is not recommended, are you referring to what's proposed under 2C?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. And also, page 106, under 4.4.1, where it talks about the 1A option of getting a report back. Is there time between now and the end of the financial year to get a report back and implement any outcome of that report?
We've already forewarned raised platforms could be constructed of a limited number. So they could be, I've probably got 6 schools, could be probably action for raised platforms before the end of the financial year.
So, sorry, you've informed who? I didn't quite get
sorry,
that.
we'll procure this through Fulton Hogan, our network maintenance contract.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch the answer to that question. So you've informed Footnote? Sorry.
To expend the to expend the 833,000, I've just indicated that we probably wouldn't get through that. We'd get through a proportion of it. So I've already, and we would procure that construction through Fulton Hogan, our maintenance contract. So I've identified roughly 6 schools where existing pedestrian crossings or curb outlets could be converted to raised platforms.
So in terms of the timing, if we did support 1A and which requested a report back to potentially progress that, what would the timing of that report be?
I guess we would be looking to bring it back to the to either the next Strategy and Finance Committee. We would hopefully be able to turn that around reasonably quickly, given that Stuart's already been and his team have been doing some work on thinking about how this could be delivered. And then it would be handing that over to the contractor, Fulton Hogan, to implement within the time available.
So if that came to an April meeting, are you suggesting there would still be time to implement that before the end of June?
Yeah, it would be a push to get it done if it's delayed until the April meeting.
Well, that's why I'm asking the question, because that seems to be the...
Can I refer to Bryce Hosking for further comment?
Yeah, we'd be probably, in reality, we'd be bringing a report back ASAP. So we'd probably be aiming for the 3rd of April, which would be a full council. That'll occur before the next Strategy and Finance meeting to seek approval. As Stuart's referenced, we might be looking to spend about $300,000 of that on those 6 schools worth of raised crossings, which, you know, if we can get to April the 3rd, we should be able to get that delivered, but anything beyond that, those funds would be just considered as savings.
Thanks.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just confirming, so all those jobs would just have to be contracted prior to 30 June, would that be correct?
Yes, essentially. So we've given Fulton Hogan the heads up that this work is coming, so they're sort of mobilising for that and getting ready. Essentially, we would just issue it to them like we do most of our small maintenance work that we do.
Yeah. So what it makes you getting at is contracted versus completed. Really just clarity on that.
We would contract them, but yes, they'd be looking to complete the work and be paid for it prior to June 30.
Yep, thank you. Cheers.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. That exhausts our questions. Somebody prepared to move some recommendations? Councillor Johnson, do you want to have a go? Oh, do you want to move some recommendations? Okay, the floor's yours. Oh, that's true. Do you need one?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I haven't consulted with anyone about this, so I'll just put up what I think is best, and we'll see if anyone's prepared to second it. I'd like to put forward 1A and 2B.
Okay, we've got a seconder on Councillor Naylor.
I see my ability to read the room hasn't failed. That's good. I just briefly talked to those. I think, it's unfortunate the way this has timed with the change of government and the uncertainty around, whether if we go ahead and do it, it would still be acceptable, or if we'd have to do some of it. But I think the option of providing some raised platforms outside 6 schools is at least a small contribution to pedestrian safety, in particular safety outside schools. And so I'm happy to try and salvage something from this rather than nothing at all. In terms of the full speed management plan, my read of that is a lot more of a controversial proposition, and I think there's sufficient uncertainty around the 2C option that staff have presented that we'd be better to just put that work on hold until we've got more information coming forward. So that is my proposal.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair, and I think Councillor Johnson sort of summarised it pretty well. There's so much uncertainty out there. Do we salvage something out of this? I think we all want safety outcomes around the schools. I'd have to say 2B, I think that is the right call. It definitely wasn't strongly supported. It was very divisive. It would have put almost 25% of the city under a permanent 30-kilometre speed limit, which I thought was just an overreach. Once we get the GPS and the government policy outcomes, we'll know where we sit around variable speed limits. My pick, and bearing in mind I'm meeting the Transport Minister in the next 2 weeks, that there will be a pushback on it. And I think that's something the officers probably, they can't really say it, but it probably will happen. So how can we get something out of this? If we can get some raised crossings around some schools, and we do, even if we only do 3 or 4, I think it's a positive. So I'm happy to support Councillor Johnson's 1A and 2B. It has been, there's been so much time put into this, and it would be nice to get something small out of it, bearing in mind that 2B, it might be killed off completely. So we just don't know yet. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes any further comments. So we'll now put those 2 recommendations before us. Thank you. Okay, that's supported unanimously, 12 votes for. Thank you. That moves us on to our final item, item 13, which is our committee work schedule. And our GM, is there anything to have comment on, or as read?
No, as read.
Thank you. Any questions from members? I'll just make note that Councillor Hapeta was pursuing a line around exploring a review around that consenting item. And that's something that we can work through outside of this to maybe put in an item before us in a future agenda. And I referred in the comments that would refer this to work schedule, but perhaps we'll just bring it as a recommendation. No further questions. I'm happy to move that the Strategy and Finance Committee receive its work schedule dated February 24, seconded by Deputy Chair Councillor Naylor. Any comments? Okay, yep. Councillor Hapeta, do you want to push further on that item or put something more formal before us now? I understand you might, so the floor is yours if you want to comment.
I've just had a communication with Mr Murphy and he suggests that we move a motion at the work schedule.
Okay, floor is yours. Do you want to
So
move it? I didn't get that memo.
Yeah, I'd just like to put a motion forward. I'm just doing it on the fly. That we look to oh, sorry, I'm just trying to look at the motion that I put up originally.
Our officer, Chief Planning Officer, were you able just to perhaps craft something for Councillor Hapeta with her intent with that background?
Through you, Mr Chair, David Murphy, Chief Planning Officer, my communication with Councillor Hapeta was that if there's a direction for a piece of work, then it would need to either come through the work schedule and just talk to the Chief Executive. He also reminded me, or the other option is a notice of motion. So it would be up to Councillor Hapeta to either put forward an item for the work schedule or consider a notice of motion. What I can say, I guess, in terms of listening to the conversation during the course of the meeting, I think any report back, I think, before the council made any decisions about changes to the district plan, I think the report back, a useful first step would be to provide an overview of the way in which the district plan is broadly managing the different types of development pressures that we're seeing, from rural residential through to residential, greenfield, industrial, so we could provide an overview of effectively what the district plan is doing at the moment, which would allow the council to then respond if they wanted to take or direct officers to do work on any further changes.
Would we know how long that would take?
The team have a significant work program at the moment across the FDS, the LTP, development contributions and those other plan changes I talked about. I mean, looking at if it was to come back to this committee, I think May would be a stretch, but August would certainly be achievable.
Okay, so I'll put a motion then that we look to, if we can put a motion up that we look to have see the changes.
Perhaps with another suggestion to bounce off you, Councillor Hapeta, while it's a little bit informal, with the option of having a notice of motion. Oh, mind blank. Notice of motion. I wonder whether we not put some prior thought into it before we present it off the fly at a committee. And there's enough will in the room to make sure that we get the signatures to bring that forward. And I'm happy to work with you in support of that.
Okay. We just don't want to lose it.
We won't lose it. I think you captured a really good point. Did you have any further points to add at this point? Mr Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. I think you've made the right call there. I support Councillor Hapeta. I don't want to see it wait to August if it's going to be a report of what is informing the district plan or not informing. We just need, because it could be both. That needs to be sooner rather than later. We're losing revenue as a city now, I believe, and I think the officers, will need to see that as well. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. There's no further wishing to speak. I moved it. It was seconded by Councillor Naylor, the work schedule, and now I can invite the vote. That is passed unanimously, 12 votes for. That concludes our business. Thank you to the staff. Thank you, members, for your contribution today. And I believe that it concludes business for our requirement to be here. So thank you. Close the meeting. Oh, sorry. Good point. Before I close, can I call on our Deputy Mayor to perhaps close with karakia?
Tēnā koe, Mr Chair, o te rā, tēnā tātou. Just before I close with a karakia, I'd like to acknowledge the sad passing of Efeso Collins, Green Party Member of Parliament this morning, a champion and advocate for his communities, a great loss, not only for them and the Green Party, but also Aotearoa. He passed away this morning, so did Owen Topia, a respected kaumātua, especially at St. Michael's Church in Marae, in the Highbury community. And yesterday, Anton Tano, a respected papa, koro, and community member of Ashurst. And for all of those who have passed away recently and their loved ones, we send our aroha and we acknowledge their grieving, the whānau, the friends and the community and colleagues. So we'll finish with this karakia. My neighbour once said to me, Mr. Flyger, bless him, he said, when you have a cry, they're worthy of tears. Ngā mihi o te rā, greetings for today. Kia tātou e hui hui nei to those of us gathered here. Kia pai ngā mahi katoa. May we do well. Kia tau te rangi Māori. Let there be peace. Ki ngā tangata katoa to everyone. Kia ora. I think Katie should have done the karakia, you know. That's right. Kia ora. Tēnā tātou.
Ngā mihi, thank you. Some poignant points there. Thank you and your karakia. That closes our business for today.